No, he has not. He has never been RHD, no acting RHD. Can I ask the Honourable Minister, being given that G2 Hospital has a population base that is twice that as Jawaharlal Nehru, where Dr. IN is currently posted, with twice the number of beds, twice the number of staff, and a hospital under whose management come two national hospitals, which is the Brown Sequard Hospital and the Mocha Eye Hospital, and to ask him whether against this backdrop, bearing this in mind, he can consider retransferring back Dr. IN to G2 Hospital.
Mr. Speaker, sir, at Victoria Hospital, there also we have an acting regional health director. This Victoria Hospital is as busy as G2 Hospital, have two or more hospitals attached to that, and many more patients attending that hospital. That again, also the acting RHD is doing a good job.
Okay, coming back to the clientele of G2 Hospital, can I ask the Honourable Minister whether he is aware that the Honourable Prime Minister, just like me, since yesterday, is the recipient of a petition titled Petition Against the Transfer of Dr. Ismet Naou, Regional Health Director, from Dr. G2 Hospital, and whether signed by 4,000 people, which I'm going to table just now, whether in the light of this, for the sake of the clientele of G2 Hospital, he would kindly consider retransferring him back to G2 Hospital.
Mr. Speaker, sir, if the Ministry of Health and all these services with 15,000 officers, with so many centers, will start working in terms of petition, but then what will be happen to our services?
Can I ask the Honourable Minister,
Silence.
Honourable Minister, whether in fact the transfer of Dr. Naou was not as a result of a clash that he had between himself and the Director of Health Services, a Dr. M, who was being posted at the Ministry of Health, continued, against regulations, I understand, to perform operations at the G2 Hospital. This was reported to your SCE, and a few days later, this Dr. Naou was transferred to Rosebell and transferred brutally overnight.
All transfers are done overnight. There is no transfers that have to be done with a notice of 1 month for the others. And secondly, if ever there is any clash, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, you come and give me all the details of the clash.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Can the Honourable Minister inform the House if ever an RHD goes on leave or on vacation, what is the protocol of his ministry, and if such occasions occurred in the past few years or months?
Mr. Speaker, sir, yes, I'll take on this example itself that Dr. Naou, he was on leave last year from 3rd of February 2020 to 3rd of September 2020, nearly more than 6 months, I believe. And during that time, there was no petition, there was no complaint. The services have been running smoothly. These services have been running smoothly for all the acting directors. I wonder now, what is the reason of having so much pressure to have this RHD at this hospital? In fact, last year, when there was the pandemic, the RHD was on leave, and I've given you since February to September, he was on leave.
One last question. Who would try? May I give it to the leader?
I have a general question. The Minister was very pleased to tell us that all transfers are overnight. But does he really think that in year 2021, when you have a hospital of 600 beds or more, that you have a director there, it is good management practice, and you're not surprised at the state of the health service nowadays, when you are happy to transfer heads of hospitals overnight without any transfer of power, or without even finishing what they are doing? Have you ever seen this anywhere else apart from the Mauritius Health Service?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, sir. A hospital is run by the consultant in charge of the departments. Is run by the manager of the human resource. The RHD overlook everything. The clientele, what the honourable member was saying, the clientele is not for the RHD. The clients, the patients, are being treated with the specialists, with the GPs. They are in touch with the patients. They are in touch with the specialists, and not the RHD. The RHD oversee only the proper running of the services and transferring an RHD overnight. This is the job of an RHD, that he should be, at any time, be called for transfer or for any other duties as per his scheme of service.
Next question.
B921.
Oh, what is happening now?
Mr. Speaker, sir.
What is happening on both sides? Both sides of the House. Both sides of the House, please. Both sides of the House. Both sides of the House. You stop shouting. What's your business in that? I am putting order in the House. Cool yourself. Cool yourself. Cool. Oh, you withdraw that word. You withdraw that word. Thank you very much. You're a great leader. You've withdrawn your words. Okay. Silence now.
Mr. Speaker, sir.
Oh, please, protect your health. Protect your health. I appreciate the joke.
Mr. Speaker, sir.
So the question.
I wish to refer to my reply to PQB 145 at the sitting of the National Assembly on Tuesday, 6 April 2021. Remdesivir is an antiviral, the effectiveness of which is controversial. There are 3 significant studies which have assessed the effectiveness of this medicine. In 2020, a study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA, showed a reduction in the time required for complete recovery in patients with moderate forms of COVID-19, especially if the treatment was started very early. The WHO Solidarity Trial study showed disappointing results with no reduction in mortality and hospital stay in patients treated with remdesivir. In September 2021, the phase 3 result of the Discovery study appeared in the Lancet, involving infected adults over 18 years of age with either decreased oxygen levels in the blood or a need for supplemental oxygen. This study showed no clinical benefit in treated patients versus those who did not have remdesivir. The contradictory studies do not allow a definite conclusion to be drawn on whether or not remdesivir is beneficial or not. Given early, it seems to have a slight efficacy in patients with little disease. Given late, it is clearly not effective. Based on my ministry's protocol, the prescription of remdesivir will depend on the evolution of knowledge about this medicine and the clinical situation of the patient. The multidisciplinary clinico-biological group, which meets every day to review the cases of COVID-19 patients, will help in deciding whether or not to prescribe this treatment, depending on the requirements of each patient. In doubt, and pending further studies, it was decided to reintroduce remdesivir in the national protocol. In September 2021, the clinico-biological group has recommended the procurement of tocilizumab injections and eventually remdesivir for the treatment of COVID-19 patients. The inclusion of remdesivir for the treatment of COVID-19 has already been considered by my ministry. In this regard, procurement of 600 vials of 100 milligram have already been initiated by my ministry. The tender was launched on 5th October 2021. and the closing date of the tender was 19th October 2021. This tender has now reached the stage of evaluation, leading to the issue of award through the established protocol.
Thank you. I am no professor in medicine, but I read the report from the WHO titled Therapeutics and COVID-19 Living Guideline of 24 September 2021, which is about a month ago, wherein it is stated, we suggest against administering remdesivir in addition to usual COVID-19 treatment, page 48. And on page 24, we recommend treatment with IL-6 receptor blockers, tocilizumab, for patients with severe or critical COVID-19 infection. Can I ask the Honourable Minister whether, being given this report, favouring tocilizumab, whether the Ministry will adjust accordingly?
Yes, in my reply, I already stated that in September 2021, both these medications, remdesivir and tocilizumab injection, have been recommended by the clinical biological team.
In the light of WHO recognizing tocilizumab as a proper medication, that was about 3-4 months ago, can the Honourable Minister confirm to the House whether there was a local company importing that medication? I'm not too sure which company, but I've had information, which is used for the treatment of arthritis, had approached the Ministry to buy this medication for treatment of COVID-19 patients, and in the process, if the Ministry had done so, which it did not, lives could have been saved in the meantime.
Mr. Speaker, sir, no company has the right, and it is not a normal procedure for a company who is mandated to sell medication in Mauritius to come to the Ministry and say that I am offering this medication. Purchase of medication will have to be through the experts, through the doctors, through the specialists, and then their recommendation will have to follow the normal procedure. Now, in case this one medication is being recommended by the experts, the Ministry will do the normal purchase procedures. This is right. This is the right way of doing things.
Next question. You have it else?
Yes. Yeah, I understand what the Honourable Minister has stated. Procedures are procedures, but when it comes to saving lives, not many people have maybe needed that medication, but some could have been saved by this. Yeah. Notwithstanding this backdrop, would the Ministry have procured for the sake of saving lives of people?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, sir. Already these medications have already been procured with the procedures, but at the same time, the Ministry also do procure medication in case that medication is needed for some serious patients. We'll expedite it in, to get the medication as quickly as possible. These procedures are being followed.
Next question.
Yes. B922.
Mr. Speaker, sir, the House was informed of the situation concerning the disbursement of funds by Saudi authorities to mosques in the answer to a PQ B153 on the 6th of April of the current year. Because of the lockdown and travel restrictions due to COVID-19, the planned visit of an interministerial delegation from Saudi Arabia to Mauritius to assess the needs of mosques and establish the modus operandi of disbursement of funds was on hold. However, following the opening of our borders on the first day of this month, the easing of sanitary protocols and the resumption of direct flights, my ministry was informed on the 6th of this month that the Saudi side wishes to send its delegation to Mauritius next month. Our embassy in Riyadh is coordinating with the relevant Saudi authorities in preparation of the visit. Once the Saudi delegation would have made its assessment of the requirements of the mosques and the necessary mechanism established, the funds to the tune of $6 million USD already pledged by the government of Saudi Arabia could be disbursed accordingly. With regard to the disbursement to the fisher community, sir, the House may wish to note that funding
of projects in the fisheries sector, including those to empower the fisher community of Mauritius, will be implemented through a general framework agreement entitled MOU for Cooperation in the Field of Fisheries. This MOU was signed between Mauritius and Saudi Arabia on the 7th of April 2021 in Riyadh and aims at enhancing cooperation between the two countries in the fields of fishing, fisheries and fish farming. Pursuant to the provisions of the MOU, a joint technical committee to follow up and ensure its implementation has been established in September 2021. A first virtual meeting of the committee is to be held in the coming months to draft an agenda for a meeting in person over the operationalization of the MOU. My ministry has also informed that the Saudi authorities are coordinating among their ministries in view of the operationalization of assistance to the fisheries sector, including support to the fisher community. In view of the recent opening of our borders and the resumption of normal communications between Mauritius and Saudi Arabia, we are confident that our cooperation will move faster as from now on.
I thank the Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs for his question. This is the third time I'm questioning on this issue. And to him, I would like to convey our appreciation to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for the grant that they are giving to the mosque, for the mosque and to the fisher community. From time to time, I will question him again on the progress. I'm glad there is. So this is, thank you.
It is unfortunate because of the circumstances that we all do. Mr. Speaker, things have been delayed, but I am ready, of course, to open the books and to give any information with regard to that project to the Honourable Member.
Honourable. Yes, Mr. Speaker, in relation to the disbursement of funds by Saudi authorities to mosque and Islamic school, can I ask the Honourable Minister on the disbursement process? Will it be directly disbursed to the mosques and school, or will it be routed through the government consolidated fund or through the Islamic Cultural Center?
I did answer that particular issue last time in the PQ, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I did inform the House that at that time, in fact, there was a proposal from the Mauritian side for the Islamic Cultural Center to set up a foundation which will be responsible for coordination between the Saudi authorities and the mosque in Mauritius. And I did also inform that the draft charter of the proposed foundation, as well as a copy of the draft MOU in Arabic, have been submitted to the Saudi authorities. But what I think now, Mr. Speaker, sir, is that when the delegation comes, I suppose things will be clarified, and upon the proposals of both parties, I'm sure both parties will come to an agreement how to disburse the funds. So that's why it is important that the delegation comes next month.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sir, Honourable Minister just mentioned that there is going to be a foundation and a draft of the charter has been circulated to the Saudi authorities. May I know from the Honourable Minister whether the composition of the Board of Council for that foundation has been tentatively established, and if same has been communicated to the Saudi authorities as well, or just the charter that has been sent?
Yes, to be more precise, Mr. Speaker, sir, the draft charter of the proposed foundation and the copy of the draft memorandum of understanding, which was vetted by the legal advisor of the ICC, were in fact forwarded to the Saudi authorities for consideration. And the Saudi authorities in July last year requested that a fresh translated version of the documents in Arabic language be submitted, and this has been done, but this is where things stopped. And we haven't heard from the Saudi authorities anymore. So this is why, Mr. Speaker, so I repeat what I just said. Once the delegations will be in Mauritius, things will become clearer, and I'm sure the project will come to a materialization.
Honourable Member, the table is advised that PQ B953
PQ B984, 985, 986, and 987 have been withdrawn. Next question.
B923.
Mr. Speaker, sir, in reply to part A of the question, as at 21st October 2021, a total of 199 patients suffering from COVID-19 was admitted in the 5 regional hospitals, and a total of 34 patients was admitted at the intensive care units of the new ENT hospital. Mr. Speaker, sir, in reply to part A2 of the question, asymptomatic patients or patients suffering from mild COVID symptoms of the COVID-19 are advised to stay at home, self-isolation as per the established protocol. The number of patients in self-isolation as at 21st October 2021 is 5,251 for G2 Hospital, 2,053 for SSR Hospital, 4,979 for Flak Hospital, and 1,200 for Nehru Hospital, and 1,108 for Victoria Hospital. In Mr. Speaker, sir, in reply to part B of the question, since 5th March 2021 till 21st October 2021, 295 patients suffering from COVID-19 have passed away. In reply to part B1 and B2 respectively, 142 deaths have been attributed to COVID-19, while 153 deaths have been attributed to other underlying causes.
Permettez-moi tout d'abord de présenter mes vives sympathies aux familles de nos concitoyens qui ont perdu la vie malheureusement à cause du Covid-19. Puis-je demander à l'honorable ministre si, concernant les personnes positives mais dont les décès n'ont pas été attribués au Covid-19, si des études ont été faites afin de déterminer si ces personnes auraient tout de même perdu la vie à ce moment précis, ou est-ce que c'est le Covid qui a joué un rôle pour accélérer et précipiter leur mort?
Mr. Speaker, sir, studies so far, yes, I don't have any studies on this subject. I think this is an important subject that in the future we have to assess. I agree with you, Honourable Member. Now, it would be with time that we can really see whether deaths have been accelerated due to COVID because of the presence of COVID, but at this time, I don't have such studies in hand to give an explanation.
Merci. Est-ce que l'honorable ministre peut nous dire si, depuis l'arrivée du variant Delta, y a-t-il eu une augmentation de contamination et de cas sévères de COVID-19?
Mr. Speaker, sir, the Delta have been detected as from the earliest report dated in mid of September. And we've seen that cases have been reported, many cases have been reported as from August. It will be with time that such an exercise can be done to determine whether the Delta has been, the number of cases reported has been more, or there has been a surge. Probably with doing more testing, testing for genetic testing for the variants, we will be able to establish that direct link.
Thank you. I refer to part B of the question. Can I know from the Minister whether there has been any death that has been recorded during self-isolation period?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, sir. In fact, I remember I had this information in my PNQ, but deaths have been recorded in self-isolation. I think there are 4 deaths have been recorded. Out of them, 3 is due to COVID and 1 is not due to COVID.
Next question.
B924.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I presume that the honourable member is referring to the COVID-19 home self-testing kits, which are different from the COVID-19 rapid antigen test kits. In fact, the rapid antigen test kits should be used by trained medical personnel. And on the other hand, the COVID-19 home self-testing kits are screening tests which might orient towards a diagnostic but do not provide a definite assessment as to the status of its user and can be performed by the user at home. Mr. Speaker, sir, the importation and sale of the COVID-19 home self-testing kit is regulated by Consumer Protection Regulation 2021. Moreover, the quarantine, control of sale and use of COVID-19 home self-testing kits Regulation 2021 stipulates the institutions and persons who can import, sell, and or use the COVID-19 home self-testing kits and the conditions thereof. Importers of the self-testing kit are required to obtain an importation permit from the Ministry of Commerce and Consumer Protection. All applications received are forthwith transmitted to a standing committee of my ministry for the technical evaluation to be carried out on the proposed COVID-19 home self-testing kit, following which appropriate recommendations are submitted to the Ministry of Commerce prior to the approval of the import permit. In reply to Part A of the question, the Ministry of Commerce has approved the importation of 2,021,366 COVID-19 home self-testing kits. The quarantine, control of sale and use of COVID-19 home self-testing kit, Regulation 2021, also provide that any person tested positive to COVID-19 shall forthwith inform the quarantine authority. I'm informed that all persons having been tested positive with COVID-19 home self-testing kits report to the health institutions to confirm their status. In reply to Part B of the question, the Consumer Protection Regulations 2021 stipulate the person or institutions to whom wholesale pharmacies are authorized to sell the home self-testing kit. I'm informed that on 9th October 2021, the Ministry of Commerce was apprised of a locus whereby the COVID home testing kits were being sold. A surprise inspection was accordingly carried out by Consumer Affairs at the locus on 22nd October 2021. However, no sale of the COVID-19 home self-testing kit was observed. Moreover, the Quarantine Regulation 2021, Control of Sale and Use of Home Self-Testing Kit, provide that every sale of a self-testing kit shall be recorded in a register which shall be produced to officers of my ministry on demand. Any person who contravenes these regulations shall commit an offence and shall, on conviction, be liable to a fine not exceeding 500,000 rupees and to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years.
Merci.
Can the Honourable Minister table a list of the companies that was being granted the import permit for the test kit?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, sir. I will table it in due course.
L'honorable ministre est-il au courant que des home self-testing kits sont vendus au vu et au su à travers les réseaux sociaux et les applications de messagerie instantanée?
Mr. Speaker, sir, the honourable member can inform the Ministry of Commerce as well as the police for investigation and for any action to be taken.
Has the ministry or the minister come across cases where people use the home kit, they are tested negative, and then when they go to hospital, a few hours later, 1 or 2 hours later, they are found to be positive? I've come across a few cases like that. What is the quality control there is on such kits in terms of reliability?
In terms of the test being performed at home, it is also a procedure that has to be individually accounted for. It may be that somebody is being tested by the self-testing kit at home to be negative, and at the hospital being given that there is a professional who is used to do the testing, and the proper way of doing the test is being carried out and is found to be positive. Now, this is made available to the public to do the testing. It is an indicative, it gives an indication of the someone being tested positive or not. Now, about the quality of the test, I've already given it in the reply, that this being subject to a standing committee, where the standing committee evaluates, especially for the self-testing kit, where you have to get it a WHO approved or EU approved, things like this.
Last question.
Merci. Si j'ai bien compris des réponses données pendant la PNQ, les rapid antigen tests et les home self-testing tests ne sont pas comptabilisés. Puis-je donc suggérer à l'honorable ministre de préciser que les chiffres communiqués au quotidien sont seulement de ceux qui sont symptomatiques et testés à travers les tests PCR, car cela pourrait être perçu comme induire la population en erreur, car ces chiffres ne représentent pas le nombre réel des cas positifs.
Mr. Speaker, sir, in the PNQ, I've already extensively explained why we should give, why it is not significant to have rapid antigen tests to be publicized, or what is the importance of giving the PCR test, with all the details of that vaccination and all that.
Next question.
B925.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm informed that as of 22nd October 2021, a total of 798 genome sequencing has been carried out. Out of those 798 sequencing, there were 570 successful sequencing and 228 failed sequencing. Of those 570 successfully sequenced cases, 472 were local and 92 imported cases. Mr. Speaker, sir, with regard to part A of the question, I wish to inform the House that on an average, the local sequencing is carried out twice a month at the interval of 2 weeks since July 2021. Samples were being sent abroad on a monthly basis. As at October 2021, we are sending samples for sequencing twice a month for genomic surveillance to our World Health Organization collaborating centers, the National Institute for Communicable Diseases in South Africa, and KwaZulu-Natal Research Innovation and Sequencing Platform, South Africa, through the CDC Africa collaboration. With regard to part B of the question, I wish to inform the House that the results of sequencing are as follows. Variants of concern, alpha 7, all imported cases, beta 18, all imported cases, delta 46, 27 imported cases, and 19 local cases. Lineage B11318, 446 local, 3 imported, others non-variant of concern, 10 local cases, 40 imported cases. Mr. Speaker, sir, with regard to the response strategy adopted, I wish to inform the House that the vast majority of viruses are characterized by constant genetic evolution, more or less rapid depending on the virus. It occurs in particular following mutations introduced into their genome. For a virus like SARS-CoV-2, the emergence of variants over time is therefore a definite expected phenomenon. Sequencing makes it possible to reconstruct the phylogenetic tree equivalent to a human family tree of the spread of the virus around the world and to identify mutations of the virus. It is important for every country to participate in this surveillance. On a national level, this surveillance can make it possible to specifically identify contamination clusters and therefore identify groups of people who need to be monitored. In this sense, sequencing is a complementary tool to tracing strategies. Sequencing allows viruses to be classified according to their degree of contagiousness or clinical aggressiveness, that is variant of interest or variant of concern. The identification of the particular strain or variant also makes it possible at the international or national level to test the effectiveness of the vaccines on the virus and to ensure that the vaccine is still effective, which is the case currently for all known variants. The response strategy also allows our country and the world, in the event of a virus becoming resistant to the vaccine one day, to manufacture a new vaccine effective against a mutant resistant to the first generation of vaccines.
Given the number of cases, positive cases that have been registered, would the Minister consider to review the ratio of sampling that is being done? Because many cases have been noted in different regional hospitals.
Mr. Speaker, sir, this sampling being done by the Central Health Lab, and it is carried out in a scientific manner, given that the number of cases and how they do pick up samples from the different locations, from the different, those who are tested positive. I don't have the details of how the samples been done, but nevertheless, I'm going to give all the information in due course.
Thank you. The WHO recommends sequencing of at least 5% of the positive cases, and based on the answer given by the Honourable Minister, we are well below this 5%. Is the Honourable Minister aware that a country's access to genomic sequencing is one of the 4 criteria that the United Kingdom relies on so as to determine which travel list a country belongs to? And currently, Mauritius does not form part of the countries with approved proof of vaccination to enter the UK, meaning that a Mauritian entering the UK, even if fully vaccinated, must still self-isolate for 10 days. Is the reason why Mauritius is not on this list, which is an extensive list of more than 100 countries, is it because our rate of sequencing is very low?
Mr. Speaker, sir, let me first inform the House that sequencing being done in Mauritius recently, thanks to the hard work done by the Central Health Laboratory, the staff of the Central Health Laboratories, in terms of equipment, in terms of reagent that the Ministry have already procured. But at the same time, we are one of the countries who have done more sequencing compared to the population base, compared to the rate of positivity in the country. Now, the second, we wish to do more sequencing, but at the same time, we have to also see that reagents are not easily available. The third thing is that recently, Ministry has already procured another apparatus. Now we have 2 sets of apparatus doing sequencing. One is called the Thermo Fisher apparatus, and another one is called the nanopore apparatus. The nanopore apparatus, the WHO experts are in Mauritius at present doing training for the staff at the Ministry of Health to do the sequencing, and also they have also collaborating with Mauritius to get more reagents for sequencing. Mauritius started the sequencing in April, and as from now, the number of tests being carried out, the number of samples being assessed locally is just remarkable.
Honourable, next question.
B926.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to inform the House that following the phasing out of the quarantine centres, my ministry enlisted the services of 34 medical practitioners for the domiciliary monitoring unit, DMU, on a 4-month contract basis to effect domiciliary visits on patients tested COVID-19 positive in self-isolation. The DMU has started its operation since 2nd September 2021. Medical practitioners are currently attached to the DMU and are under the responsibility of the medical superintendent of the hospital. 8 are posted at G2 Hospital, 5 at SSR Hospital, 7 at Bruno Chong Hospital, and 6 at Nehru Hospital, and 8 at Victoria Hospital. The number of practitioners attached to each regional hospital has been worked out based on the population in each region. Given that there are only 34 medical practitioners for the DMU out of the required number of 60 medical practitioners, new applications have been invited for enlistment of medical practitioners by way of public advertisement on 4th October 2021. A total of 17 applicants have been received. Applications have been received as at the closing date, which was 18th October 2021. After scrutiny exercise, 15 candidates have been found eligible for enlistment as medical practitioner of the DMU. Approval of the Public Service Commission has been thought on 22nd October for the ministry to set up the interview panels to assess the candidates. Mr. Speaker, sir, COVID-19 positive patients are segregated according to gravity of cases. Positive patients who stay at home are sorted according to well-defined criteria. As regard to Part B of the question, an average of 75 patients in self-isolation are under supervision of the DMU in each regional hospital daily. Since the coming into operation of the DMU, as the date, the number of patients in self-isolation under the supervision of the Ministry of the DMU is as follows. I've given the figures before. I repeat it: 5,221 for G2, 2,053 for SSR, 4,979 for Flak Hospital, 1,200 for Nehru Hospital, 1,108 for Victoria Hospital. An average of 15 home visits and an average of 50 phone monitorings are effected daily by DMU at each regional hospital.
Merci. Puis-je demander à l'honorable ministre s'il a reçu des plaintes venant des patients en auto-isolement du fait qu'ils n'ont reçu ni de visite à leur domicile, ni de suivi au téléphone et par conséquent sont livrés à eux-mêmes et n'ont aucune directive médicale à suivre.
Mr. Speaker, sir, all those who are tested positive have been given a specific phone number. In case they have any issues regarding their health, they have to call the DMU team, and the DMU team will assess whether these patients will need a home visit, whether these patients will need a monitoring over the phone, or these patients will need to be transferred to a hospital or ENT. Now, it's, the patient has given this information. It's for them to call the DMU team to establish whether these patients will require any information. Yes, I also have received complaints from patients, but the DMU team is doing their best to see a priority of those who will need an assessment or those who will need more attention compared to those who don't need any attention. Obviously, patients at home, they are asymptomatic or with minimal mild symptoms. There is no that issue of visiting those patients, or it can be, everything can be done on a phone call.
Thank you. It's been brought to our attention, Honourable Minister, that many staff are attached to the DMU. They are currently looking for a transfer or to leave the unit because they're not happy with the working condition. Are you aware of that? And if yes, what are you doing to remediate the situation?
Mr. Speaker, sir, at present working in the health sector demands a lot of dedication and conviction, because as a staff you work in the DMU where you have to answer calls, where you have to interpret information and at the same time take decision. Those who won't be able to do it, obviously they will be transferred. And those who have been recruited for that purpose, they have to do that job.
Last question. Go ahead.
Thank you. Will the Minister confirm whether the domiciliary monitoring unit have had any clinical training in assessing signs and symptoms of infected or supposedly infected patient at home? And B, who do they report to? Are they a supervising officer, or are they supervised before making clinical decisions? Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, sir, the DMU, the recruitment of the doctors, before they start working for the DMU, they have been trained. They have been given a brief training on the job that they have to do, and at the same time, they have to report to the medical superintendent.
Next question.
B927.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm informed that the Financial Services Commission has taken cognizance of information being leaked by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, ICIJ, in the so-called Pandora Papers, which has received worldwide media coverage, including Mauritius. Press articles that have been released as of now do not mention Mauritius as an offshore center where named transactions have supposedly taken place. However, we note from the press releases that entities registered in Mauritius have been named. Mr. Speaker, sir, as regards actions being initiated by the FSC, the latter has been looking into the various allegations made by ICIJ against Mauritian individuals or entities. As at date, 87 individuals or entities have been cited in various press articles, locally and internationally, related to the Pandora Papers, out of which 12 are borne on FSC records. Out of these 12 entities or individuals, 8 have been found to be Mauritian. The FSC is gathering information, which is ongoing, from the entities mentioned and their respective management companies. The FSC is assessing the reported information to establish any breach of its relevant laws and shall take the appropriate actions should the allegations be found to be true. At this stage, no inquiry has been initiated.
Thank you. Has the Honourable Minister taken cognizance of the statement by the FATF President a few days ago on Pandora Papers, where he stated, obscuring the true owners of corporate trusts and other structures and those who control them is a common technique to hide illicit profit. So in the light of this statement, doesn't the Honourable Minister consider that his ministry should take the names that appears on Pandora Papers very seriously and investigate, not just by the FSC, but by other organizations also entrusted with the duty to investigate money laundering cases?
Mr. Speaker, sir, I must also agree that effectively the President of the FATF did mention, did refer to the Pandora Papers with regard to the beneficial ownership. And as you may recall, one of the action items that we had to implement was to set up a register of beneficial ownership in Mauritius that would be accessible to competent authorities. And I must say, with regard to our jurisdiction, we have already set up that kind of register. And when he was referring to jurisdictions where they need to make available these kind of informations, I'm sure he was referring to those jurisdictions that don't have that kind of information.
Specific. Names have been has come out in the papers internationally, as the Honourable Minister has mentioned. One of the purposes of using an offshore structure is to hide illicit profits. So has there been any interministerial committee or any committee between the FSC and the MRA, Mauritius Revenue Authorities, to investigate whether the people cited in the Pandora Papers has they taken any illicit tax evasion, for example?
In fact, Mr. Speaker, sir, there has been a meeting where some different authorities concerned were called upon to look into these cases. And like I said, information are still being gathered to see if there are any matters that would require any inquiry should there be certain breaches that have been occurred. And I must also inform the House that we are referring to cases that dates back to, on transactions that dates back to the late 80s, 90s, and the year 2000 as well.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Ministre, la publication des Pandora Papers par l'Express a vu le bon nombre de Mauriciens sur cette liste. Une des personnalités retrouvées sur la liste, selon les Pandora Papers, est un responsable de la State Bank of Mauritius, l'ancien administrateur d'Air Mauritius, négociateur du défunt BAI. Est-ce que vous ne pensez pas qu'une enquête, le fait que la personnalité est au centre financier de plusieurs institutions mauriciennes, est-ce que vous ne pensez pas qu'une enquête s'impose sur cette personnalité qui a plusieurs chapeaux dans les institutions financières de l'île Maurice?
Mr. Speaker, sir, as far as I can recall the article that has been published, did mention the name of a few Mauritians, and if he's referring to one particular person mentioned in these articles, my question is whether the transactions that have been referred to by this particular individual, is it of any breach to any law? That is a question. Not because someone has undertaken a transaction means that this transaction is illegal or is illicit. So we have to be careful about whatever we say. I mean, I'm sure the honourable member who put the question, the honourable team, he himself is very well involved in this particular sector. I'm sure he himself has been involved in the setting up of structures, be it locally or overseas. Does that mean that when you set up a structure in another jurisdiction or in Mauritius itself, in an offshore environment, it means that is something which is illegal? I don't think so, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Last supplementary.
Thank you. But in this particular case, Honourable Minister, it is reported that this gentleman dealt with a company by the name of Regula Limited, a subsidiary of Deutsche Bank based in British Virgin Islands, and Deutsche Bank has been fined 15 million euros for money laundering using that very same Regula Limited. So we are not in the realms of speculation. It's very specific allegation about Mauritian using Regula, which has been found to be involved in money laundering.
Mr. Speaker, sir, it's good to also note that the initial transaction was between that individual and Merrill Lynch, the entity that was selling that insurance policy. And afterwards, Merrill Lynch was acquired by that company he just mentioned, and that is why there's been, according to the information that I have, a requirement that that policy be transferred to the BVI. So the question about intentionally that particular person had used this company to kind of carry out some, say, unlawful transactions is not correct to say that.
Next question.
B928.
Monsieur le Président, je tiens à remercier l'honorable membre de me donner l'occasion, par le biais de cette question parlementaire, de brosser le tableau de l'évolution de la situation économique. L'année 2020 a testé nos limites. Notre PIB s'est contracté de 14,9%. Tous les secteurs de l'économie se sont contractés, à deux exceptions près. Le tourisme a même connu une chute d'activité de 80%. Plus encore, au cours des exercices 2019-2020 et 2020-2021, notre PIB s'est contracté 2 fois consécutivement de 6,9% et 5,2% pour chacune de ces périodes. Les contractions de notre PIB résultent des effets de la pandémie de la Covid-19. Plus particulièrement, aux conséquences des confinements en 2020 et 2021, ainsi qu'à la fermeture des frontières ayant entraîné l'arrêt brutal du secteur touristique. Concrètement, ces contractions ont ramené notre PIB au niveau d'avant 2016. Monsieur le Président, pour empêcher l'écroulement de notre structure économique et financière, nous avons déployé des mesures à hauteur de 30% de notre PIB pour soutenir les entreprises et les ménages mauriciens. Sans le soutien historique du gouvernement aux opérateurs économiques et aux ménages, l'impact de la pandémie sur l'économie aurait été bien pire. Depuis le premier jour, nous avons été à leur côté et nous avons tout mis en œuvre pour éviter des vagues de défauts de paiement, des faillites en cascade et un tsunami de licenciements. L'objectif étant de préserver les emplois et les moyens de subsistance de la population. Sans cette aide sans précédent du gouvernement, la contraction de notre PIB aurait entraîné la mise au chômage de quelques 100 000 personnes, soit 20% de notre population active. nous avons réussi à maintenir le taux de chômage à 9,2%. Monsieur le Président, les éléments que je viens d'exposer m'amènent à la partie A de la question. Selon la dernière publication de Statistiques Mauritius, le taux d'inflation était de 3,2% pour les derniers 12 mois se terminant en septembre 2021. Ce taux d'inflation s'explique principalement par l'impact de la hausse des coûts du fret au niveau mondial et une augmentation des prix des produits de base au niveau international. À vrai dire, de nombreux autres pays connaissent également une augmentation du taux d'inflation. Pour citer quelques exemples, aux États-Unis, le taux d'inflation est passé de 1,3% pour l'année se terminant en août 2020 à 5,3% en août 2021. Au Royaume-Uni, le taux d'inflation est passé de 0,5% à 3% au cours de la même période. Au Canada, il est passé de 0,1% à 4,1%. En Afrique du Sud, l'inflation est passée de 3% à 5,1%. Ici à Maurice, en tant que gouvernement responsable, nous avons pris les mesures nécessaires pour soutenir le pouvoir d'achat des consommateurs et les protéger contre de fortes augmentations de prix sur certains produits de grande consommation. Le gouvernement a ainsi introduit des subsides sur plus de 30 produits pour préserver le pouvoir d'achat des ménages. Parmi ceux-ci, le gouvernement subventionne 7 denrées de base, à savoir les conserves, les conserves de poisson, les tomates en conserve, le fromage, l'huile alimentaire, la margarine et le lait en poudre. La subvention couvre quelques 371 marques. Un montant de 500 millions de roupies a été affecté à la subvention jusqu'en décembre 2021. Monsieur le Président, en ce qui concerne la partie B de la question, selon les derniers chiffres publiés par Statistiques Mauritius, le taux de croissance du PIB pour le deuxième trimestre de 2021 par rapport au trimestre correspondant de 2020 est estimé à 18,8%. Le secteur des TIC continue d'afficher de bonnes performances avec un taux de croissance de 8,5% au deuxième trimestre, supérieur aux 7,3% enregistrés au deuxième trimestre de 2020. Une reprise majeure a été enregistrée dans le secteur de la construction, plus 567,7%, dans le commerce de gros et de détail, 24,9%, dans le secteur du textile, 96,6%, et dans les autres industries manufacturières, 68%. Nous constatons aussi une reprise significative de l'investissement de 128,9%, qui s'est élevé à 17,4 milliards de roupies contre 7,6 milliards de roupies au deuxième trimestre 2020. Les exportations de biens ont augmenté de 52,6%, tandis que les dépenses de consommation ont-elles augmenté de 20,2%. Monsieur le Président, la partie C de la question, le niveau de la dette brute du secteur public était de 419 milliards de roupies à la fin du mois de juin 2021. En pourcentage du PIB, la dette s'élevait donc à 96,2%. L'augmentation du niveau de la dette s'explique d'une part par près de 50 milliards de roupies de dépenses exceptionnelles, mais nécessaires pour faire face à la pire des crises de notre histoire, et d'autre part par une baisse brutale des recettes fiscales à hauteur de 40 milliards de roupies, induite par les deux contractions économiques d'affilée que nous avons subies. Ainsi, de mars 2020 à aujourd'hui, le gouvernement a déboursé plus de 25 milliards de roupies pour soutenir les entreprises et les particuliers dans le cadre du WAS, du CIS et du Special Assistance Scheme pour les travailleurs indépendants et les PME. Quelques 28,7 milliards de roupies ont été affectés à la mise en œuvre de grands projets et programmes qui contribueront à stimuler la croissance économique et la création d'emplois. Environ 4,4 milliards de roupies ont été dépensés pour l'acquisition des fournitures et équipements médicaux de vaccins, ainsi que pour les frais de quarantaine et autres frais connexes. Environ 1,1 milliard de roupies ont été dépensés pour la mise en œuvre d'un certain nombre de projets dans le cadre du programme de relance économique. Quelques 400 millions de roupies ont été versés à titre des indemnités accordées aux frontliners. En outre, l'injection de capitaux dans le National Property Fund Limited pour régler ses obligations immédiates en matière de dette et d'injection de capitaux dans la National Insurance Company Limited en vue de l'exercice de restructuration de cette dernière a augmenté la dette du secteur public d'un montant net de 5 milliards de roupies. Monsieur le Président, l'ouverture totale de nos frontières à partir du 1er octobre, rendue possible par le déploiement du programme de vaccination, a insufflé un nouveau dynamisme à l'économie. Du 1er au 20 octobre, nous avons reçu plus de 30 000 touristes et le niveau des réservations continue d'augmenter. Maurice n'étant plus sur la liste du groupe d'action financière, les perspectives de développement du secteur des services financiers se sont-elles aussi considérablement accrues. En outre, nous attendons une reprise significative des investissements tant publics que privés dans les mois à venir. Une agence de mise en œuvre et de suivi des projets, PIMA, a ainsi été créée au niveau de mon ministère pour suivre, accompagner et conseiller dans la mise en œuvre des mesures budgétaires. En outre, le High Level Committee, présidé par l'honorable Premier ministre, accélère le traitement et l'approbation des projets d'investissement du secteur privé en veillant à ce que les permis et les licences soient délivrés en temps voulu. Ces développements majeurs devraient permettre d'atteindre un taux de croissance du PIB autour de 5% en 2021. En juin 2021, les statistiques Mauritius a prévu un taux de croissance du PIB de 5,4% pour 2021. Moody's Investors Service a, dans une mise à jour de son Credit Opinion sur Maurice, publié le 20 septembre 2021, prévu un taux de croissance du PIB de 5% pour 2021 et de 6,7% pour 2022. Ce sera donc une croissance plus rapide que la médiane de 4,7% des pays possédant la note BAA. Dans son rapport sur les perspectives de l'économie mondiale, publié en octobre 2021, le FMI a lui anticipé pour Maurice des taux de croissance du PIB similaires à ceux de Moody's, c'est-à-dire 5% en 2021 et 6,7% en 2022. La semaine dernière, la Banque de Maurice a quant à elle maintenu sa projection initiale de croissance du PIB de 5,5% pour 2021, et cela sur la base de la croissance positive élevée du deuxième trimestre de 2021 et sur l'amélioration de la confiance grâce à la campagne de vaccination en cours et à la réouverture complète de nos frontières. Enfin, le taux d'inflation, selon la Banque de Maurice, devrait lui se situer à 3,8% en 2021. Merci.
Mr. Speaker, may I ask the Honourable Minister of Finance whether he has taken cognizance of the latest report published by the International Monetary Fund entitled World Economic Outlook, published in October 2021, and in particular table A7 at page 122, where with respect to Mauritius, the projected increase in consumer price index, inflation, is projected to be 10%. And this is more in line with what Statistics Mauritius themselves have just published on Friday in respect to increase in construction prices.
Monsieur le Président, je me permets ici de dire que cela ne concerne pas l'année calendaire. C'est une comparaison, si vous regardez bien, par rapport au mois. C'est sûr que sur certains mois, vous avez des hausses imprévues au niveau de l'inflation. Ça peut être dû à un phénomène externe, ça peut être dû à ce qui se passe en Europe. Mais nous devons regarder par rapport à l'année. Les projections que nous regardons, c'est par rapport à l'année calendaire ou l'année fiscale. Concernant l'année calendaire, nous nous appuyons sur les chiffres publiés par la Banque de Maurice qui est de 3,8%. Et si jamais nous voyons qu'il y a des disruptions concernant le taux d'inflation, à ce moment-là, on viendra avec des mesures appropriées, comme ce qu'on a fait concernant les produits de base, où nous avons mis sur la table 500 millions de roupies avec des subsides pour maintenir le pouvoir d'achat des Mauriciens.
IMF is for the country. I know from the Honourable Minister of Finance, he stated in his budget speech earlier this year, after confinement was over, that, and I quote at paragraph 438, our public sector debt to GDP ratio will be reduced by around 4 percentage points to 91%. And today we just heard him say that it is 96.2%. So it's on the increase. Instead of decreasing, our public debt level is on the increase.
Monsieur le Président, je remercie l'honorable membre de m'avoir posé cette question. Au niveau de mon ministère, nous avons mis en place le Financial Stability Committee et aussi le Fiscal Stability Committee. On est en train de voir comment faire pour réduire le niveau de la dette. D'un côté, nous parlions sur la reprise économique avec la hausse du PIB, qui automatiquement va baisser le taux d'endettement de notre pays, mais de l'autre côté, concernant la baisse de la dette du gouvernement, en accord avec ce que préconisent certaines institutions internationales. Nous travaillons dessus et nous allons venir avec des propositions pour ramener, pour baisser le niveau de la dette publique, en particulier le niveau de la dette du gouvernement par 4% d'ici le mois de juin 2021. Merci. 2022, excusez-moi.
On the GDP, the Honourable Minister of Finance just mentioned GDP expected to be between 5% and 5.5%, depending on whether we rely on the Bank of Mauritius statistics or others. How does he reconcile this with his own figures, which he gave to this House in his budget speech at paragraph 435, where he said that for fiscal year 21-22, we are expecting a GDP growth of 9%, which is obviously not going to be achieved.
Bien sûr, Monsieur le Président. L'année fiscale, Monsieur l'honorable membre, l'année fiscale concerne juillet 2021 à juin 2022. Par rapport aux 5 ou 5,5 ou 5,4%, nous parlons de l'année calendaire, janvier jusqu'à décembre. Et nous savons tous que la grande partie de l'année calendaire, nous étions sur le processus de vaccination. Nous n'avions pas encore ouvert les frontières. Nous étions dans ce processus où on était en train de réallumer la machine économique. Donc, oui, la partie la plus difficile, ça a été du mois de janvier jusqu'à mars, et de mars à juin, et à partir de juillet à septembre, ça a été les 9 premiers mois étaient assez difficiles, parce que nous n'avions pas encore réouvert les frontières. Depuis la réouverture complète des frontières au mois d'octobre, nous parlons de plus de 30 000 touristes. Ce qui fait que nous pensons pouvoir atteindre le chiffre, la barre des 300 000 touristes. Nous l'espérons pour jusqu'à décembre 2021. Mais ce que nous travaillons actuellement, c'est surtout de dépasser la barre des 600 000 touristes pour la période juillet 2021 à juin 2022. C'est sur cette période que nous visons le chiffre de 600 000 touristes ou plus. Parce que si vous faites une comparaison avec le chiffre de juillet 2020 à juin 2021, là le chiffre était de 3 000 touristes. Donc l'impact de cette hausse, je dis bien une hausse énorme du chiffre du nombre de touristes passant de 3 000 à 600 000 ou plus, sera conséquent sur le PIB de Maurice. Et aussi, le fait d'ouvrir de nouveau, nous voyons bien que certains investisseurs arrivent de nouveau, reviennent vers le pays. Nous voyons bien qu'il y a une confiance qui se répand. Récemment, j'ai vu une photo qui circule sur le net par rapport à l'achat d'un téléphone portable. Et j'ai vu qu'il y a un attrait énorme de nouveau des gens qui veulent sortir et qui veulent consommer et qui veulent investir. C'est cela aussi la reprise économique. Donc oui, il y a une différence entre le taux de croissance au niveau calendaire et une différence au niveau du taux de croissance pour l'année fiscale 2021-2022.
Last supplementary. Next question.
B929.
Mr. Speaker, sir, the 6th and the 7th combined periodic report on the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which covers the period 2013 to 2021, has already been vetted by the State Law Office, and approval of Cabinet is being sought for submission of the report by mid-November this year. Mr. Speaker, sir, the report was due for submission by the 15th of October 2021 to the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child, and in this respect, my ministry has requested for an extension to the UNCRC, the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child, and I am informed that the request is under consideration.
The Committee on the Rights of the Child, in its last correspondence on 22nd of July 2020, asked a series of questions to the state. Among one of the questions asked is in relation to the children's bill. The bill has been voted almost 1 year now, in December 2020. May I know from the Honourable Minister, why has this bill still not been promulgated and come into force?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, sir, indeed, we are approaching almost a year since the 3 pieces of legislation. I'd like to remind the House, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we are talking about 3 different pieces of legislation, and the proclamation, the promulgation of these acts do take a little bit of time because we have some collaboration which is cross-cutting. There is the judiciary, for example, which is involved with the setting up of the Children's Court. There are certain regulations that need to be drafted in order to proclaim the Children's Act. The Office of the Commissioner of Police is imminently going to be launching the register for the child sex offender. So, and we need to also bear in mind, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we have been going through quite strict sanitary restrictions, which has hindered the tremendous work that has been going on in the process in view of proclaiming those 3 pieces of legislation.
The Committee on Rights of Child also queried at paragraph 21 legislation to protect and promote rights of children with disabilities. May I know from the Honourable Minister whether we have any update with any legislative reform to better protect children with disabilities?
Mr. Speaker, sir, the definition of the child in the Children's Act itself removes any kind of doubt whether a child with disability will be treated differently or not. He will not be treated differently. And secondly, the House will recall that there is a disability bill which is not under the purview of my ministry but under the purview of a colleague minister. There is a draft disability, there is a bill that will be presented to the National Assembly imminently, and that will definitely be taken care of the queries and the apprehensions raised by my honourable colleague.
Thank you, sir. Will the honourable minister state whether the 3rd optional protocol to the convention has been ratified by our government? If yes, when? If not, why not?
Mr. Speaker, sir, the periodic report has taken a bit longer than expected, again, due to some delays of submission by different stakeholders. For example, the office of the DPP had some few delays in submitting their views and comments, but I'm happy to report to the House that Cabinet is expected to examine the report in its next sitting, and thereby, after we're seeking approval of Cabinet, and then the report will be submitted to the committee.
Speaking specifically of the 3rd optional protocol to the convention, not the report.
That will all be taken. It is a 350-page long report, and it includes the provision that you are talking about, so it will all be taken dans l'ensemble.
Next question.
B930.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm informed that since 2015 to date, the total number of 91,300 candidates sat for the school certificate examinations, and there were 139 cases of grade changes made during that period. With regard to the higher school certificate, out of 52,877 candidates who sat for the examinations during that same period, there were 56 cases of grade changes. Allow me, Mr. Speaker, sir, to give the details thereof. For school certificate, in year 2015, there were 44 cases. In 2016, there were 20 cases. In 2017, 21 cases. 2018, 17 cases. 2019, 26 cases. And 2020-2021, 11 cases. For the high school certificate examinations, in year 2015, there were 9 cases. In 2016, 20 cases. In year 2017, 5 cases. 2018, 15 cases. 2019, 6 cases. 2020-2021, 1 case. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm informed that the causes of discrepancy may result from marking scheme and assessment criteria not being consistently applied by a few markers having a different interpretation of the marking scheme. This tends to be more common in essay-type and open-ended questions which require the personal judgment of the marker. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm hereby tabling information pertaining to the number of cases, subject-wise, for both Cambridge SC and high school certificate, where discrepancies and anomalies resulted in grade changes.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, sir, can I ask the Honourable Minister whether her figures that she gave for 2020-2021 has taken care of design and technology discrepancy that was noted, especially in the results of 37 students of 2 particular secondary schools?
Mr. Speaker, sir, in the case of design and technology results for high school certificate, it is true that 29 candidates from Collège du Saint-Esprit and 8 candidates from New Eton College who had entered for design and technology paper 9705, these students found their results as subsidiary results. And this information was given to the MES, which queried, and the case was referred to the Cambridge International, and the latter informed that in that particular, for these 2 batches of students, the special consideration that was meant to be applied because of the fact that they did not take the paper because of torrential rains was not applied. And immediately the results were then reviewed and the students were given their A-level results.
Honourable Minister, now that some students have to join university, prior to getting the HSC results, government has made a proviso for these students to get their results directly in that university. I have a case at Toronto University where a student got A+ in a subject, but when he got his result in Mauritius, it is only A in main, and in subsidiary, he got a small letter A, but when he got his result, it is a small letter B. There are discrepancies which are taking place, and I think Cambridge has to be notified about the same, because here I hold the 2 different results in my hand.
Mr. Speaker, sir, When the results were given to the students online, it was clearly specified that these were provisional results and the proper scrutiny that normally Cambridge does was not completed. And it was mentioned that the results would come with the result slip. And if there are minor changes, the students were already informed about it. What we did prior to their getting their results was to facilitate the admission procedure, and we had requested Cambridge to ensure that the results could be communicated to the universities prior to the release of the results so as not to penalize the students.
Honourable Minister, there is a letter addressed to you on 21st October. I have a copy of it. A student has got 1,111 in 4 papers, and still the overall grade is not an A+, which it should be. It is only A capital. And will you check with MES whether this discrepancy, if it is, can be modified?
Mr. Speaker, sir, this information was already conveyed to me, and the MES is already dealing with Cambridge International examinations for that.
Honourable Minister, students, when they go for remarking of papers, I am not talking of clerical check, but remarking of papers, you know, like me, it is very costly. Would you, with the help of MES, check with Cambridge University if the fee could be subsidized, especially for modest families, where students very often, they do not go forward because they do not have the amount of money to do so?
I suppose that subsidy cannot be requested from Cambridge. We will try to see whether things can be done at our level, but I'm sure that the students who are on the social register could even request from the Ministry of Social Security for such
Next
support.
question.
B931.
Mr. Speaker, sir, at the very outset, I wish to inform the House that in view of the pandemic situation, no oral assessments were held for Cambridge School Certificate examinations in 2021. In addition, due to the torrential rains on the 28th April 2021, the English paper 1 could not be taken. I wish to highlight here, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the oral English component counts for 12% of the overall grade. Cambridge Assessment International Education was contacted, and we were informed that in such circumstances, a special consideration applies. Mr. Speaker, sir, as I already informed the House in my reply to PQB 415, special consideration is an adjustment which CAIE makes if the candidate misses 1 or more papers in a given subject in circumstances considered as exceptional and adverse, for example, disruption of an examination due to being COVID positive, cyclonic weather, floods, earthquakes, etc. And this provided that the candidate has taken at least 1 component in the subject. Mr. Speaker, sir, candidates for the English paper in Mauritius entered for an option comprising the oral test. We were informed that the IT systems at Cambridge could not have produced a grade in the subject unless the input of marks for all components is effected. The marks for the oral component were thus determined on the basis of the marks scored by the student in the only paper for which they sat, that is paper 2. This is the established standard operating procedure of Cambridge for such cases, and the calculated mark of the oral test was determined in the same way for all candidates. I'm tabling as requested a breakdown of candidates' results in oral English bandwise from 1 to 5. Mr. Speaker, sir, with regard to part B of the question, as explained earlier, the grades assigned in the oral paper had no bearing on the overall marks of the candidates. In fact, it was the other way around. The grades assigned to the oral paper were based on the marks scored by the candidate in paper 2. Thus, the results in English at the Cambridge School Certificate Examinations 2021 cannot be attributed to the marks allocated to students for the oral assessment. I'm tabling the papers, Mr. Speaker.
Next question.
Supplementary. Yes, Well, thank you, Honourable Minister. I'm a bit flabbergasted because I knew 12% is the weighting of oral in normal circumstances. I've just heard you. What avenues are left for aggrieved students if they are not happy with the grade they've got, but still they got a grade, 4 or 5 in oral, and this will bear a lot of prejudices to them in future? What can these students do
Mr. Speaker,
for remedy?
We have to bear in mind that we were in a pandemic situation, and on top of that we had the torrential rains. The student did not take the papers, and in normal circumstances, if Cambridge did not apply the special consideration, the students would have been ungraded. We had negotiated with Cambridge. Cambridge allowed our students to get a grade. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, as I've just explained, the results attributed to the students for the oral papers did not determine their grading. It is, on the other hand, the results that they obtained through the written paper that allowed the allocation of the marks for the oral papers.
Next question.
B932.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to inform the House that for people who cannot be vaccinated owing to medical history and or health issues, a regional non-eligibility committee and a national non-eligibility committee to COVID-19 vaccine have been instituted since June 2021. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm informed that from June to October 2021, there are 733 people who could not be vaccinated against COVID-19 because of their medical history or health issues as assessed by the Regional Non-Eligibility Committee and the National Non-Eligibility Committee to COVID-19 vaccine. Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to inform the House that a medical certificate is issued by the National Non-Eligibility Committee to COVID-19 vaccine stating that the said person is not eligible for vaccination due to medical history or other health issues. However, non-eligible persons should undertake mandatory PCR test every 7 days, which is sponsored by my ministry in order for them to have access to their workplace.
Now, apart from workplace, Honourable Minister, these people sometimes have to go to different places where there are restrictions, not the workplace I'm saying. The card that you are saying, will this be applicable there also?
Mr. Speaker, sir, the restriction to access to other places is already defined in the quarantine regulation. Now, as per the workplace, it is already in the quarantine regulation for restriction of access. But for other places, as you will see, we are extending the vaccination pass requirement. And obviously, somebody who cannot be vaccinated will have to produce his medical or her medical non-eligibility certificate.
Honourable Minister, will there be vaccines adapted for the health, depending upon the health of these people in the future?
Let's hope so. Let's hope so. For the time being, those vaccines that are available are being administered, and in case of contraindication, they are not being administered. But in the future, if we do have vaccine that will be of universal coverage, it would be definitely benefit one and all.
Thank you. Can I ask the Honourable Minister if there has been any cases where some people were denied the non-eligibility and then got severe reaction after having a vaccine?
To my knowledge, there are cases where they have been denied, but they have a reaction. For example, somebody who has an allergic to food, and then for food reaction, for food allergies, the non-eligibility certificate is not issued, and that person may have developed some reaction. But the panel assessing the non-eligibility, they have to recommend for which vaccine is suitable or not. But there has been no serious cases of being not given the non-eligibility certificate and then at the same time having a severe reaction.
Next question.
B933.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I am informed by the Central Water Authority that the regions of Grand Bay and Poudre d'Or in constituency number 6 fall under the water supply zone north. I am further informed that about 20 kilometers of old pipelines have been replaced over the recent years as follows. 1. 3.6 kilometers of pipelines have been replaced from Cap Malheureux to Saint-François Goodlands in the sum of 42,266,105.39 cents. All works were completed on the 3rd of November 2017. 2. 13 kilometers of distribution mains have been replaced in Morcel-Mansoine, Pérébert in the sum of 76,906,819 rupees, excluding VAT. All works were completed on the 1st July 2019, and after commissioning of the above projects, hours of supply in the concerned areas have increased from 6 hours to 16 hours daily, and there has been lesser recourse to water tanker services. 3 kilometers of pipelines have been replaced at Upper Geranium and Lower Geranium roads and Adolphe de Plevitz Road in Grand Bay under minor works contracts for a sum of 12,589,321 rupees and 18 cents, excluding VAT. Works were completed in December 2017 and February 2018. Mr. Speaker, sir, I am also informed by the CWA that the renewal of another 5.2 kilometers of old defective pipelines from Bois-Mong to Fond-du-Sac are expected to start in December 2021 for a duration of 15 months. Hours of supply are expected to further improve after implementation of the project.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. I hope this pipeline from Bois-Mong to Fond-du-Sac will solve the problem of Morcel-Mandilchan, and we have other places, Honourable Minister, which are water stressed. In Grand Gobe, we have La Marie, Citerne, Indira Gandhi, Flamboyant, and I can go on with the list in Goodlands, okay, Gopal Road, Boudou Road, Mamzelzan, Mosque Road. Now, I hope you have, the CWA has a special squad which is on the field in order to repair damages caused to pipes, because sometimes the bedding is not proper, and sometimes valves are damaged. Sometimes the water pressure is not enough, and these people suffer. Now Diwali is coming, and many religious festivals. Will the minister make sure that these problems are addressed in due time?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, sir, these are the problems that officers of the CWA have to tackle on a daily basis. There are special units that have been put in place to tackle these problems. On top of the pipe replacement, which I have mentioned in my main reply, there are additional projects in order to increase distribution of water, and additional projects which have been identified with the two members of government of that constituency, Honorable Tilak and Honorable Ramdari, and this concern installation of additional pressure filters which will be installed at New Goodlands Reservoir during the month of 2021. There is also a project at Grand Marais, and we are also looking into the increased storage capacity of Nicollière Reservoir and upgrading of Nicollière treatment plant to increase the water being distributed to the northern regions. We are aware that with time, most of the reservoirs in the northern regions are now undersized. That's why we are increasing the capacity of water distribution in the northern part of the island, and we are also replacing undersized pipes and also replacing other types of pipes which are now quite old. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
However, my colleague has mentioned about the Diwali festival coming next week. So can the Minister inform the House whether any special arrangements have been put in place by the CWA for this festive season, period, and whether any hotline is being advertised, because we are in Rosehill facing some problems recently because of the broken pipe due to the Metro Express works.
I thank the Honourable Member for this question. We are all aware that Diwali is a very important festival in the country. We are making all necessary arrangements as it is made every year for the normal distribution of water a day before and on the day of Diwali. And I shall be very glad to communicate to members of the Assembly, officers which are going to be on standby on that particular day. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Next question.
B934. Mr. Speaker, sir, in Mauritius, all persons having received a primary series of the same COVID-19 vaccine, that is 2 doses of the same vaccine or 1 single dose of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. The COVID-19 Vaccination Committee recommended that an additional dose of vaccine be administered in order to strengthen immunity as is being carried out in other countries. The COVID-19 Vaccination Committee stays guided by the recommendation of the WHO, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, as well as other international scientific literature. This was subsequently approved by the high-level committee. In this respect, persons having received 2 doses of Sinopharm vaccine may be given an additional dose of the same vaccine, provided there is a lapse of 4 months following the administration of the second dose. As regards persons inoculated with Covishield AstraZeneca vaccine, they are eligible to receiving a 3rd dose of the same vaccine or may be administered an additional dose of Johnson & Johnson vaccine. With regard to persons vaccinated with Covaxin vaccine, they may receive an additional dose of Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Mr. Speaker, sir, the administration of the additional dose is being carried out on a voluntary basis. As at 22nd October 2021, 14,868 number of persons have already received a 3rd dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. The number of persons vaccinated with Sinopharm vaccine is 465,732, of which 870 have received a 3rd dose of Sinopharm vaccine. 155,834 persons have been fully vaccinated with AstraZeneca Covishield, of which 1,318 have received a 3rd dose of AstraZeneca vaccine. 99,062 have been fully vaccinated with Covaxin, of which 12,680 have received its 3rd dose with Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Mr. Speaker, sir, in reply to Part B of the question, the WHO recommends that moderately and severely immunocompromised persons should be offered an additional dose of COVID-19 vaccine as part of an extended primary series, since these individuals are less likely to respond adequately to vaccination following a standard primary vaccination series and are at risk of severe COVID-19 disease. This additional dose can be the same vaccine or a different vaccine to the one previously administered. However, the decisions of the COVID-19 vaccination committee are not based solely on recommendations from the WHO, but also on information from the manufacturers of the vaccine and international and in particular scientific literature. Several studies have demonstrated that the administration of mixed COVID-19 vaccines confers higher protection than administration of an additional dose of same vaccine in terms of neutralizing antibodies and cellular immunity. In October 2021, one study on heterologous SARS-CoV booster vaccination in the United States evaluated homologous and heterologous booster vaccination in persons who had received an EUA COVID-19 vaccine regimen. Adults who received the COVID-19 vaccine at least 12 weeks prior to enrollment and had no reported history of SARS-CoV infection received a booster injection with one of three vaccines, namely Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, or Pfizer. This study demonstrated that homologous booster increased neutralizing antibody 4.2 to 20-fold, whereas heterologous booster increased neutralizing antibody 6.2 to 76-fold.
Le Président, l'honorable ministre peut-il nous dire pourquoi dans le cadre de l'administration de la troisième dose, son ministère n'a pas procédé à un exercice de ciblage, notamment envers les personnes les plus exposées au virus, du secteur de la santé, du secteur médico-social et les personnes vulnérables et âgées, comme cela se fait en France par exemple, au lieu de le laisser au bon vouloir de tout un chacun de décider ou pas de se faire injecter une troisième dose.
Mr. Speaker, sir, the third dose or booster dose, as you call it, it is based upon the recommendation of the vaccinations committee, especially based upon the duration, that is, from the time that you have done your last dose, and that should be at least 4 months. If we will start prioritizing, as Honourable Member has said, then it would be difficult for us to know, because the vaccination campaign started as early as January, and for the different categories, it has been an ongoing event till June and July. So calling people in respect of that priority will not meet the purpose of doing the booster dose, but calling people according to the time that they have done the vaccination. Let's say somebody who has done his vaccination in February, obviously this person is invited to do the booster dose.
Selon les chiffres qui viennent d'être communiqués à la Chambre par l'honorable ministre, ne pense-t-il pas qu'on pourrait améliorer la communication, notamment parce qu'il n'existe pas de message clair et net envers la population? Je dis bien envers la population. Là, ici, l'honorable ministre il a longuement élaboré sur les bienfaits de la troisième dose, sur l'importance justement de se faire injecter cette troisième dose du vaccin contre la COVID-19. Message clair et net envers la population.
Yes, thank you, Honourable Minister. Honourable Member, to come up with this question. In fact, Ministry is preparing a communication strategy, especially for the booster dose. But at the same time, we still have some people who haven't done their first or second dose. As earlier, I have pointed out what is the vaccination status for first and second dose. So we are more concentrating in trying to call those patients who haven't done. And now we shouldn't forget that the young, that is the adolescents that we are actually vaccinating. And we are preparing a strategy to get those young people vaccinated. And obviously it will come at a time where we have to concentrate on the vaccination of the boosters or dose for the whole population.
Est-ce que l'honorable ministre peut nous informer quelle est la période d'attente après la deuxième dose ou la troisième dose pour que quelqu'un puisse voyager à l'étranger?
4 months, Mr. Speaker, sir. So anybody who has to travel, especially there are countries where you have to do some specific vaccine to get entry into that country. So in Mauritius, luckily, we have the Johnson & Johnson vaccine that is present, and many countries do recognize this vaccination. And if somebody has done the vaccination, that is a last dose, and there is already an interval, a duration of 4 months, he can get access to a booster dose, and that booster dose is already available in Mauritius.
Merci. Est-ce que l'honorable ministre peut nous dire si une personne qui a déjà eu le Covid et une dose de vaccin est considérée comme entièrement vaccinée, comme c'est le cas pour les voyageurs que Maurice considère comme entièrement vaccinés? Et si oui, quelles sont les recommandations de booster dose pour ces personnes?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, sir. Somebody who has done his vaccination, 1 dose, and later on has been tested positive, it is considered as, again, to be fully vaccinated. And with this, the Ministry of Health will issue a certificate certifying that this is considered as fully vaccinated, and they can travel with that. Now, it will be also somebody who has been getting it has to be the full dose, that is, has at least received 1 dose. Now, that person, when he will be receiving another dose, it will be after a duration of 4 months. That is, from the time that you have been tested positive, and then after an interval of, again, 4 months later, you can get for another dose of vaccination.
The table has been advised that PQ B949 has been withdrawn. Next question.
B935. Mr. Speaker, sir, as per the letter dated 27 August 2021, addressed by my ministry to the Mauritius Football Association, MFA, the latter has up to end of November 2021 to sort out its governance issues and to revert to my ministry accordingly. I wish to inform the House that as at date, the MFA has not yet reverted to my ministry. At this stage, the question for an assessment of the conditions for the lifting of the said sanctions does not arise. As regards Part B of the question, I wish to point out that Section 9 of the Sports Act 2016 will be applied only as a last resort measure when all avenues for redressing the situation have been exhausted. Thank you.
Monsieur le Président, je constate que le ministère des Sports a pris pratiquement 1 année pour envoyer officiellement un rappel à l'ordre à la MFA, après la sanction de la FIFA dans l'affaire de transfert illégal des Jeux malgaches au cercle de Joachim. Et cela, probablement, Monsieur le Président, n'aurait pas eu lieu s'il n'y avait pas eu la récente affaire de voyeurisme allégué. De ce fait, l'honorable ministre peut-il nous dire comment la MFA, dont les statuts ne sont pas en conformité avec la Sports Act 2016, va-t-elle pouvoir se mettre maintenant en conformité avec une section de cette même loi?
Monsieur le Président, premièrement, je ne suis pas d'accord que cela a pris 1 année pour que le ministère réagisse. Loin de là. Nous avons eu plusieurs rencontres avec la fédération et à plusieurs reprises, nous avons rappelé à l'ordre la fédération de Mauritius Football Association. Évidemment, les récents événements nous ont fait prendre des sanctions encore plus sévères. Quand il s'agit de se mettre en conformité avec la loi, ben c'est à la MFA de prendre toutes les mesures nécessaires pour le faire. Ce n'est pas à nous d'aller tenir la main de la MFA pour qu'il puisse se mettre en conformité.
J'ai bien écouté l'honorable ministre, mais peut-il nous expliquer comment, en l'espace de 3 mois, ceux qui sont responsables de cette mauvaise gouvernance au sein de la MFA vont subitement vouloir collaborer avec son ministère afin de changer les choses?
Monsieur le Président, encore une fois, moi je ne peux pas répondre pour la MFA. Et certainement, les choses ne vont pas très bien dans cette fédération. Je pense que nous sommes tous d'accord. Moi, tout ce que je peux faire, c'est d'avoir des rencontres avec la fédération. J'ai rencontré les clubs pour exposer les différents problèmes que nous sommes en train de faire face dans le monde du football. Et là, j'ai demandé la collaboration de tout un chacun pour venir de l'avant avec un plan court terme, moyen terme et long terme. Nous avons donné comme deadline la fin de novembre à la fédération. Nous attendons le plan que la fédération viendra nous proposer.
Monsieur le Président, les sanctions prises contre la MFA dans cette fameuse lettre en date du 27 août dernier touchent beaucoup plus les clubs que la fédération elle-même, que les dirigeants eux-mêmes. De ce fait, le ministre peut-il nous dire, il a parlé de dernier ressort qu'il fallait attendre encore pour justement appliquer la section 9.9 du Sports Act. Mais je puis rappeler à l'honorable ministre, à la Chambre, que ce que dit la section 9.9, en une phrase, je ne lirai pas tout ce que dit cette section de la loi, any multisport organization persistently fails to carry out its function in accordance with its rule of its act, commits an act which is prejudicial to the interest of its members or licensees, otherwise not functioning properly, the supervising officer may by written order dissolve the managing committee. Je pense, dans le cas de la MFA, Monsieur le Président, si vous me permettez, on aurait dû dès maintenant appliquer cette section 9.9 de façon à redorer le blason du football mauricien et de façon à avoir une nouvelle équipe dirigeante qui pourrait justement faire honneur au football local, aux footballeurs, alors que là, ce sont les clubs qui sont pénalisés, qui ne reçoivent plus de grands annuels, qui ne peuvent plus s'entraîner sur les infrastructures appartenant au gouvernement. L'honorable ministre ne pense-t-il pas qu'il serait temps d'appliquer cette section 9.9 et non pas permettre à cette fédération de continuer, à ses mêmes membres, à ses mêmes dirigeants de continuer dans cette même voie?
Merci à l'honorable membre de lire la section 9 de notre Sports Act, que je connais presque par cœur. Pénaliser les clubs, il faut savoir que ce sont les clubs eux-mêmes et leurs présidents qui élisent le président de la fédération. Comme on dit souvent, on mérite le président que nous avons élu. J'ai rencontré les clubs à plusieurs reprises et on a discuté de la situation. Mais je puis dire à la Chambre qu'au niveau des clubs, il y a un bon nombre, ils ont l'air d'être satisfaits avec leur président et leur fédération. Hein. Même si on ne sommes peut-être pas sur la même longueur d'onde qu'eux, il y a une très grosse majorité qui ont l'air d'être satisfaits avec leur président et qui ont défendu, dans la réunion que j'ai eue avec les clubs, qui ont défendu bec et ongle la fédération et le président de fédération. Maintenant, ce qu'il s'agit de Grant et l'entraînement, etc., donc je fais un appel au président de la fédération qui, à maintes reprises, sur plusieurs réseaux sociaux, radio, presse, etc., qui, à maintes reprises, signifié son intention de financer lui-même, la fédération elle-même, la reprise de la Ligue, puisque, à ce qui paraît, ils ont plus d'une cinquantaine de millions sur le compte de la fédération de football. De toute façon, comme j'ai dit, nous avons donné le temps au club de s'asseoir avec leur président, de s'asseoir avec les officiers du ministère, de préparer. C'est pas juste une question de donner des sous là, d'ouvrir les terrains, battre un péboule, et puis la situation redevient pareille. L'année prochaine, c'est la même chose. Et j'aurai les mêmes questions avec l'honorable membre. Alors, la question n'est pas là. La question, c'est de trouver un plan long terme. C'est vrai, nous sommes d'accord, même si vous êtes là-bas et je suis ici, nous sommes d'accord. Et il y a certainement beaucoup de choses qu'il faut faire pour redorer le blason de notre football. Mais cela dépend aussi de ces clubs et des présidents de clubs dont je lance un appel. Je leur dis, venez vers nous pour qu'on puisse relever notre football local.
The chair is advised that PQ B936, B937, B989, B990, and B991 have been withdrawn. Time over.
Motion.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I move that all the business on today's order paper be exempted from the provisions of paragraph 2 of Standing Order 10.
Question is that all the business on today's order paper be exempted from the provisions of paragraph 2 of Standing Order 10. Those in favour say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Statements by ministers.
Statement.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to make a statement on the recent reopening of borders and the relaunch of the tourism sector. As the House is aware, since March 2020, Mauritius closed its borders to international travel, prohibiting operation of commercial passenger flights to and from our country. However, authorization was granted for the operation of special flights on specific conditions, predominantly for the repatriation of Mauritians stranded abroad and medical cases. Thereafter, as from 1 October 2020, government embarked on an accelerated repatriation program which targeted students, occupation and residence permit holders, and other Mauritians abroad who expressed the wish to be repatriated. The House may wish to note that in April 2021, my ministry set up a joint public-private sector working group to prepare the reopening of our borders and the relaunch of the tourism sector. As a matter of fact, government proceeded with the implementation of a phased reopening of borders, starting as from 15th July 2021, where sanitary protocols were eased and the resort tourism concept was introduced to provide vaccinated passengers the opportunity to undergo a 14-day quarantine period in a resort hotel with the possibility of enjoying all the facilities within the resort. I wish to recall that the Ministry of Health and Wellness, in consultation with my ministry and all other relevant stakeholders, elaborated appropriate sanitary protocols to ensure a safe welcome of incoming passengers, while at the same time ensuring adequate protection of the population from the virus. Taking into consideration the prevailing sanitary conditions locally and abroad, coupled with the fact that over 63% of the population was fully vaccinated as at 30th September 2021, government decided that Mauritius could fully open its borders to international travel as from 1 October 2021. This date represents an important milestone in the relaunching of our tourism sector, which has borne the brunt of the pandemic, resulting in a quasi-standstill since March 2020. Mr. Speaker, sir, as the House is aware, as announced in the Budget Speech 2021-2022, our target is to attract 650,000 tourists by June 2022, which will be attainable subject first and foremost to favourable sanitary conditions locally and abroad, but also to effective marketing, adequate airlift capacity, and an attractive tourism product corresponding to the new COVID-determined reality. It is to be noted that following the first wave of the pandemic last year, the MTPA embarked on an aggressive marketing campaign to ensure that Mauritius remains top of the mind across our main markets, including the Mauritius Now campaign, conceived through a close collaborative approach between the public and private sectors. In line with the recommendations of the joint public-private sector working group set up under my chair, Mauritius is pursuing a focused marketing campaign to boost the visibility of the destination in our traditional proximity and emerging markets, with a particular focus on digital marketing and participation in international tourism fairs. For instance, our participation in the Top Reza tourism fair in Paris was a major success, and the response from the French market has been very encouraging. Since Réunion Island is our third largest market, a delegation of the MTPA visited the island yesterday to reinforce our promotional campaign, and next week, Mauritius will participate in the World Travel Market in London to showcase the destination to the UK market. We have further amplified our presence on the international scene through interviews and interventions in various prestigious international media such as CNN, BBC, and TV5 Monde. Mr. Speaker, sir, as regards air connectivity, the House may wish to note that our airspace is, in addition to the existing airlines operating to Mauritius, increasingly opening up to additional flights and new airlines. For the month of October 2021, a total of 15 airlines are operating 239 flights to Mauritius. We're expecting 17 airlines to operate some 510 flights to Mauritius in November 2021, and 18 airlines to operate some 560 flights to Mauritius in December 2021. As regards cruise tourism, some 29 cruise vessels are expected to call at Mauritius during the 2021-2022 cruise season, and an appropriate sanitary protocol is being elaborated. Mr. Speaker, sir, in line with international practice, we have also developed sanitary requirements for all incoming passengers to the country as from 1 October 2021, whereby they have, within 72 hours before departure, to undergo a PCR test, provided there is no break in travel. Upon disembarkation in Mauritius, fully vaccinated passengers have to undergo a COVID test on day 0 and day 5, whereas unvaccinated passengers are subjected to a 14-day in-room quarantine in dedicated hotels. It is equally worth noting that 1,140 taxi operators have been trained with reference to the sanitary protocols between 8th and 17th September 2021, comprising 82 taxi operators based at the airport and 1,058 hotel-based taxi operators. Training of trainers as to the new protocols for representatives of 106 hotels and 136 destination management companies started on 24th September and was completed on 29th September 2021. Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to inform the House that for the period 01 to 24 October 2021, 240 flights have landed in Mauritius, and according to data obtained from the Passport and Immigration Office, as at 24th October, a total of 50,408 incoming passengers arrived in Mauritius on these flights, including 43,036 foreigners and 38,181 tourists. The number of incoming passengers who proceeded to quarantine centres upon disembarkation in the same period is 149, comprising 53 Mauritians and 96 non-Mauritians. The number of incoming passengers found to be COVID-19 positive upon arrival at the airport, as at 24th October 2021, stood at 40, representing 0.08% of total arrivals hailing from various ports of embarkation. Mr. Speaker, sir, the relaunch of the tourism sector in the wake of the reopening of borders has so far been a resounding success. I would like to end on a note of appreciation for all the tourism stakeholders, both from the public and private sectors, who have contributed to the successful takeoff of the industry. Mauritian tourism has historically been built on an effective public-private partnership, and we intend to pursue the same path of close collaboration to ensure a rapid rebound of tourism so as to reach the pre-COVID situation as soon as possible. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, sir, with your permission, I wish to make a statement to inform the House of the outcome of the Financial Action Task Force, FATF, plenary meeting held between 19th and 21st October 2021, and update the House on the decision taken regarding the delisting of Mauritius from the FATF list of jurisdictions under increased monitoring. Mr. Speaker, sir, the House will recall that in February 2020, the FATF decided that Mauritius should be monitored under its International Cooperation Review Group ICRG process. As a result, Mauritius was placed on the FATF list of jurisdictions under increased monitoring with an agreed action plan of 2 years to address the strategic deficiencies identified in its AML-CFT regime. In April 2020, the President of the FATF decided to pause the ICRG reviews scheduled for June 2020 plenary due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The timeline for the completion of each action item under the action plan was extended by 1 plenary cycle. Consequently, if the action items would have been completed on the agreed timeline and progress reported, Mauritius would have exited the FATF grey list at the October 2022 plenary at the earliest. However, at the high-level stakeholders meeting chaired by the Honourable Prime Minister held in March 2020, it was agreed that Mauritius would aim at exiting the ICRG process ahead of the agreed timelines. The challenges caused by the COVID-19 pandemic made the task still more difficult. My ministry, together with the core group chaired by the Financial Secretary and other immediate outcome subcommittees, engage closely with all stakeholders with the view of expediting the completion of all action items to enable an earlier exit as agreed at the high-level stakeholders meeting. Assistance from the ESAMLAG Secretariat was also sought, and it has been instrumental in the process. Furthermore, with a view to addressing these identified strategic deficiencies, government embarked on an extremely ambitious exercise and spared no efforts to overhaul the AML-CFT framework. This exercise was fully supported by the Honourable Prime Minister himself, who chaired the Inter-Ministerial Committee to monitor closely the progress made in the implementation of the FATF Action Plan. Mr. Speaker, sir, 16 months after placing Mauritius on its grey list, the FATF made the initial determination at its June 2021 plenary that Mauritius had substantially completed its action plan, warranting an on-site assessment to verify that the implementation of Mauritius AML-CFT reforms has begun and is being sustained, and that the necessary political commitment remains in place to sustain the implementation in the future. In that respect, an on-site assessment was conducted by the Africa-Middle East Joint Group of the FATF from 13th to 15th September 2021. During the visit, it was confirmed that implementation of the required reforms was well underway and that the requisite conditions were in place for implementation to be sustained, developed, and enhanced. The high-level political commitment to sustain this implementation was confirmed by the Prime Minister himself. As already announced by the Honourable Prime Minister, the FATF, at its plenary meeting of 21st October 2021, decided that Mauritius would no longer be subject to its increased monitoring. The FATF has recognized that significant progress has been made by Mauritius in improving its AML-CFT regime. In fact, FATF has concluded that Mauritius has strengthened the effectiveness of its AML-CFT regime and has addressed all the strategic deficiencies identified in its action plan. I also attended the FATF plenary virtual meeting on 21st October 2021, together with members of the AML-CFT core group and co-chairs of the IO subcommittee. Following the decision taken by the FATF to delist Mauritius from the list of jurisdictions under increased monitoring, on behalf of the government of Mauritius, I thank the FATF members, all the reviewers, and the countries and organizations who have assisted Mauritius in the process. Several countries have also congratulated and commended Mauritius for successfully completing the FATF action plan despite the challenges caused by the COVID-19 pandemic and the significant progress achieved within this record time frame. They commended Mauritius for its tremendous efforts and unflinching commitment and will in achieving this progress. They also stressed on the need for Mauritius to assist other countries in the region by sharing the Mauritian experience and lessons learned. Mr. Speaker, sir, despite the serious challenges caused by the pandemic, Mauritius did not let up its efforts to fight money laundering, terrorism financing, and proliferation financing. On the contrary, efforts were doubled so that positive and tangible progress was systematically reported to the FATF. This was made possible by strengthening both the infrastructural and human capabilities of the relevant institutions to enable them to carry out their functions properly. Numerous amendments were also brought to the AML-CFT framework. In this respect, from 2018 to date, 46 pieces of legislation were amended to assist Mauritius in strengthening its AML-CFT regime. Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to reiterate that this achievement would not have been possible without the efforts of our institutions, the undoubting support of our officers, as well as the private sector operators who have been instrumental in the fight against money laundering, terrorism, and proliferation financing. In the process, over and above working closely with the FATF and the Eastern and Southern Africa Anti-Money Laundering Group, ESAMLAG, Mauritius has engaged with several countries and international bodies to obtain technical assistance with a view to reinforcing capacity of relevant authorities in the fight against money laundering and combating the financing of terrorism and proliferation. Mauritius has received technical assistance and support from the ESAMLAG Secretariat, EU Global AML-CFT Facility, the German Development Agency, GIZ, UNODC, UK, France, World Bank, and the IMF. A technical assistance coordination committee, co-chaired by the Perm Secretary of my ministry, and the EU Commission was also set up in June 2020 with the aim of facilitating and coordinating technical assistance activities with the different donors that have been providing technical assistance to Mauritius on AML-CFT issues. This committee also allowed several experts from different technical assistance providers to coordinate the activities and hold joint meetings and trainings. It is to be highlighted that this is a unique concept that my ministry has come up with, and since June 2020, this committee has held 22 meetings. All technical assistance providers have unanimously agreed that this initiative should be marketed to other countries and that this platform has exceeded their expectations in the way my ministry has coordinated, requested, and secured technical assistance from high-caliber international experts. For the period July 2020 to date, a total of 113 targeted training sessions have been organized for the benefits of 2,373 participants from the supervisory authorities, law enforcement agencies, and other relevant competent authorities in Mauritius. The training sessions focused on numerous fields, including inter alia, risk-based supervision, suspicious transactions reporting, beneficial ownership, parallel financial investigations, targeted financial sections, non-profit organizations, and terrorism financing. We will continue and spare no efforts to continue to train and build capacity of our officers and the private sector. Mr. Speaker, sir, even if the FATF action plan items, even with the FATF action plan items, Mauritius didn't lose focus on the technical compliance and recommended actions under its mutual evaluation report. It is also worth noting that Mauritius has, in parallel with the FATF ICRD process, been submitting its progress reports biannually to SAMLAG on the progress made in the implementation of the recommended actions under the mutual evaluation report. Furthermore, since 2018, Mauritius has submitted 4 follow-up reports with application for re-ratings for technical compliance. As a result, Mauritius is now compliant or largely compliant with 39 out of 40 FATF recommendations. These actions are undoubtedly testimony of the strong commitment of this government to comply and adhere to international standards at all times. With regards to the only remaining recommendation, namely Recommendation 15 on new technologies, I will shortly introduce a new legislation to regulate the business activities relating to virtual assets. Mr. Speaker, sir, as Mauritius is no longer subject to FATF increased monitoring process, government is closely following up on our subsequent delisting from the European Union and the United Kingdom list of high-risk third countries. Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to reiterate that the delisting of Mauritius from the grey list will undoubtedly lead to increased confidence in the integrity of our financial ecosystem and boost our foreign direct investment. Government remains committed to ensure the sustainability and effectiveness of its national strategy to combat money laundering, terrorism financing, and proliferation financing well beyond the ICRG process. I would like to conclude by reassuring the House that this government will continue to preserve the integrity of our financial system and promote Mauritius as the jurisdiction of highest global standards. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Mr. Speaker, sir, with your permission, I shall make a statement regarding the implementation of the National Strategy and Action Plan on the High-Level Committee on the Elimination of Gender-Based Violence in my dual capacity as the Minister responsible for gender equality and family welfare and also as the chairperson of the National Steering Committee. Mr. Speaker, sir, as the House is aware, gender-based violence, commonly referred to as GBV, is violence that is directed at individual based on his or her biological sex or gender identity, and this violence includes physical, sexual, verbal, emotional, psychological abuse, threats, coercion, economic abuse, whether occurring in public or behind closed doors. GBV is a causal factor to huge economic cost, estimated at a staggering 2 billion Mauritian rupees, according to a quantitative survey initiated by my ministry in 2016. But more importantly, Mr. Speaker, sir, GBV is a crime against humanity and is a violation of human rights. It is the least prosecuted crime, and it is an issue that permeates every corner of our society. And we have witnessed an increasing occurrence of GBV during the pandemic. Gender-based violence is seriously impacting on the individual, the family, the community, and the country on the whole. While we can put a figure to the dense GBV causes to our economy, Mr. Speaker, sir, we cannot attribute a cost to the loss of lives, to the emotional pain, the suffering, the injuries to our citizens, including the suffering and the negative effects of GBV has on our children. Addressing this social scourge ranks extremely high on the agenda of this government. As the House will recall, the high-level committee on the elimination of gender-based violence under the chairpersonship of the Honourable Prime Minister was set up in January last year. It comprises the Deputy Prime Minister, Vice Prime Ministers, and no less than 11 ministers. It engages 16 ministries as lead agencies and 24 parastatal and other bodies as collaborators in the implementation of a national strategy and action plan to eliminate GBV. This plan, Mr. Speaker, sir, was launched on the 25th of November last year, which marks the International Day for the Elimination of All Forms of Violence Against Women. This national strategy and action plan was the first immediate achievement of the high-level committee chaired by the Prime Minister. The overall objective of the plan is to eliminate gender-based violence. The plan is survivor-focused and recognizes that GBV is cross-cutting and therefore requires a shared understanding on its root cause and its extent. Mr. Speaker, sir, the National Strategy and Action Plan is divided into 4 sub-strategies and 4 technical working groups. These groups have been set up to work towards the achievement of activities contained in each sub-strategy. The first one, the first sub-strategy, Mr. Speaker, sir, addresses the need for change in societal norms and beliefs that are against principles of gender equality and equity. The second sub-strategy looks at priority support services for survivors while holding perpetrators accountable for their actions. Sub-strategy number 3 is mandated to identify and redress discriminatory practices that perpetuate gender-based violence. And lastly, the sub-strategy 4, very importantly, makes provision for the coordination, monitoring, and evaluation. Mr. Speaker, sir, the high-level committee chaired by the Honourable Prime Minister monitors and evaluates the progress made on the implementation of the strategic plan on a quarterly basis. The National Steering Committee on GBV, chaired by myself, monitors the progress of the 4 technical working groups aligned to these sub-strategies. Mr. Speaker, sir, as soon as the high-level committee was set up in January last year, our country had to go through an unprecedented lockdown due to the COVID-19 pandemic and an immense disruption of our normal life. Despite this fact, and given the challenge of the implementation of this plan, I do have to congratulate all stakeholders engaged in the fight against GBV for having ensured to date that 69.8% of the output indicators are in progress and 28.9% have been completed out of a total target of 149 output indicators. While still much more has been achieved, I would like to highlight on a few achievements by the technical working groups. The first one being the mobile application L'Espoir, which was launched on the 25th of November last year. This application was ranked among the top 5 in the category of ethical dimensions in the World Summit on Information Society of the International Telecommunication Union. Since the 25th of November last year to 22nd of October this year, 2,121 downloads registrations have been made, 952 panic alerts attended to, and 153 users called on the hotline 139 of my ministry through the use of L'Espoir application. The main police command and control center is fully operational for intervention on alerts received. There's a strict adherence to the protocol for interventions signed between my ministry and the Mauritius Police Force in November 2020. Moreover, Mr. Speaker, sir, phase 3 of the mobile application was successfully deployed in July this year to interface L'Espoir with the Domestic Violence Information System, the DOVIS, and all alerts triggered in L'Espoir auto-generate a case file in DOVIS, which is then assigned to Family Support Bureau of my ministry. Mr. Speaker, sir, there has also been an interfaith forum which was set up on the 12th of August this year with active membership of faith-based groups of the Council of Religion. On the same occasion, an information pack for these organizations was launched and disseminated. This information pack is a tool to equip our religious leaders with necessary information to assist in addressing gender-based violence. Mr. Speaker, sir, IEC campaign on gender-based violence are crucial to bringing a change in the mindset, and to that effect, officers of my ministry conducted a training of trainers program with community development officers, and consequently IEC campaigns were deployed to sensitize adults, students and younger children through the social welfare centers, the National Children's Council, the community centers, and the Ombudsperson for Children's Office. Mr. Speaker, sir, an animated cartoon on gender concept was also launched on the 28th of September this year. My ministry and other stakeholders will make use of this animated cartoon to raise more awareness on the issue of gender inequality, which we all know is the root cause of gender-based violence. It is also meant to sensitize young minds on the gender concept. Mr. Speaker, sir, a gender-sensitive content analysis and a review of the curriculum for the primary school level is also being undertaken by the Ministry of Education. An economic empowerment program funded by the UNDP under the Japan supplementary budget was implemented with 29 survivors of gender-based violence, and those survivors were identified at the level of shelters, family support bureaus, and police family protection units. Mr. Speaker, sir, new legislations, namely the Disability Bill and the Gender Equality Bill, as well as the Protection from Domestic Violence Amendment Bill, are in process of being introduced to this August Assembly. The setting up of an observatory on gender-based violence is also in process, and discussions with the Mauritius Research and Innovation Council are in the advanced phase. On the way forward, Mr. Speaker, sir, the technical working groups will continue to ensure implementation of activities falling within this financial year, and my ministry will shortly conduct a consultative workshop to identify activities to be implemented in the next financial year, as well as working out the financial implications. The high-level committee chaired by the Prime Minister would be monitoring the implementation of all actions as per an agreed frequency. Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to place on record the tremendous support given by all those engaged in this fight against gender-based violence, be it at the level of the high-level committee or at the level of the National Steering Committee. I am pleased to report that the institutional synergy that emanated from the 4 technical groups has been a catalyst in achieving a number of highly commendable results within 1 year of launching of the National Strategy and Action Plan. And the progress status on the high-level committee on the elimination of GBV, Mr. Speaker, sir, demonstrate the kind of leadership, institutional and social capital that our country requires in order to rise up to a higher level of development. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for your attention.
Public bills, first reading.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I move that the Offshore Petroleum Bill number 14 of 2021 be read the first time.
Mr. Speaker, sir, with the permission, I beg to move that the Cybersecurity and Cybercrime Bill number 15 of 2021 be read the first time.
Seconded.
Public Bill, second reading.
Prime Minister.
Yes. I move that the Offshore Petroleum Bill number 14 of 2021 be read a second time. The object of this bill is to repeal the Petroleum Act, which dates back to 1970, with new market exigencies and dynamics such as evolving technology, higher commitments to environmental preservation, and the need for more transparency in ocean governance. It is now imperative to review the existing legislation. The Offshore Petroleum Bill serves this purpose by reflecting a modern and comprehensive legal and regulatory framework adapted to offshore petroleum activities in Mauritius. Before I delve into the legislative provisions, I believe it is important to highlight how this bill is a major breakthrough for our country, the more so against the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic and the need to provide the right impetus for our economic machinery. It is undeniable that offshore petroleum activities have been very beneficial to many countries around the globe. While the bigger countries are among the largest exploiters, such as the United States of America, Brazil, China, and Canada, smaller states have also made inroads in this very competitive industry. Trinidad and Tobago is often cited as one of the success stories amongst the smaller nations. However, this government is also fully conscious that petroleum activities have also been the subject of frustration for some countries, especially where the legal framework is not comprehensive enough. Mauritius, for its part, will be making its first steps in this sector. With this bill, Mauritius will become a new potential for petroleum exploration, and as such, it will be joining the League of Frontier Countries such as Sri Lanka, Madagascar, and the Seychelles. These countries are also at an early stage in the quest of petroleum exploration and exploitation. In February 2020, an agreement for the conduct of geoscientific survey was signed between my office and CGG Services SAS. The agreement provides for CGG Services SAS to undertake multi-client seismic data acquisition, processing, reprocessing, interpretation, data brokering, sales and marketing of seismic offshore geoscientific surveys over an exploration area covering a total of around 45,000 line kilometers in 4 selected areas of the EEZ of Mauritius. The acquisition of seismic data is important to better understand the subsurface geology and associated structures which are favorable for hydrocarbon accumulation. At this crossroad, I personally believe that this is the most opportune time for our country to prepare itself and to lay down all the necessary regulatory framework for our country to be ready and to safely embark in any potential offshore petroleum activities. We have had the opportunity and time to observe, examine, assess, and learn from the do's and don'ts of other countries. And time is now right to consolidate our preparedness for any opportunity to develop this extractive industry. In fact, the budget speech of 2015-2016, it was announced that the Petroleum Bill would be introduced to provide the legal and fiscal framework for the exploration and exploitation of hydrocarbon resources in our EEZ. The Offshore Petroleum Bill bears testimony once again that my government is moving forward on its vision and agenda as set out in the government program 2020-2024. In fact, members will recall that it was mentioned that government will come up with a unified regulatory framework, an offshore petroleum bill, a seabed mineral bill, and set up a marine biotechnology hub, amongst others, to accelerate the development of a blue economy. And this bill is, of course, the first step, but also a milestone to focus on developing new economic pillars that would steer the economy to a much higher plane. This bill shows the commitment of my government in making the blue economy an important industry to sustain economic diversification, job creation, and wealth generation. We would actively promote research expedition in our quest for fossil fuels and other minerals that can be sustainably exploited. The bill is the fruit of several consultations held between the Attorney General's Office, the Ministry of Finance, Economic Planning and Development, the Ministry of Environment, Solid Waste Management and Climate Change, the Ministry of Blue Economy, Marine Resources, Fisheries and Shipping, and the Economic Development Board, under the steering mantle of the Department for Continental Shelf, Maritime Zones Administration and Exploration of my office. I would also like to highlight the initial contribution and assistance provided by the Commonwealth Secretariat in drafting the bill. The Offshore Petroleum Bill would provide for a more appropriate regulatory regime for the prospection, exploration, retention, and production of petroleum in the seabed and subsoil areas of the maritime zones of Mauritius. Under international law, it is the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea that provides that coastal states are entitled to exercise sovereign rights on the petroleum resources present in their maritime zones, including their exclusive economic zone and continental shelf. As a signatory party to UNCLOS, the Republic of Mauritius has made submissions to the Commission on the limits of the continental shelf for its continental shelf as per Article 76 of UNCLOS. Together with the Republic of Seychelles, the Republic of Mauritius already manages an area of extended continental shelf, commonly referred to as the Joint Management Area. The Republic of Mauritius also submitted information on the limits of its continental shelf beyond 200 nautical miles in the region of Rodrigue Islands in May 2009 and in the southern Chagos Archipelago region in March 2019. Reviewing existing international and domestic legislation has been instrumental in drafting this bill. The Republic of Mauritius has abided by the provisions of the conventions, including the law of the sea that it is a party to, when it comes to the utilization of its resources. In line with the conventions and international best practices, environmental and occupational safety concerns have been put at the forefront of this new legislation. More so, existing laws of Mauritius have been integrated and applied to strengthen the Offshore Petroleum Bill. The provisions of the Maritime Zones Act in delimiting the maritime zones of Mauritius in terms of internal waters, archipelagic waters, territorial sea, contiguous zone, exclusive economic zone, and continental shelf have been respected. The provision for the carrying out of environment impact assessment during the phases of the petroleum exploration and production activities have been made. Mr. Speaker, sir, here I should emphasize that the present bill shall not apply to the prospection, exploration, recovery or mining of seabed minerals, or even to the exploration for recovery of petroleum in the joint management area between Seychelles and Mauritius. These are going to be subject to separate legislation. The bill provides more clarity with regard to the processes involved in the regulation of offshore petroleum prospecting, exploration and production. It introduces set time frames and clearly defines the roles and responsibilities of the regulatory body throughout. The Offshore Petroleum Bill provides for the Department for Continental Shelf Maritime Zones Administration and Exploration, which falls under the aegis of my office, to be the regulatory body for petroleum activities in the maritime zones of Mauritius, and which shall, inter alia, be responsible for the following: regulate, monitor and oversee petroleum activities, issuance of prospecting permits, exploration licenses, retention licenses and production licenses, negotiate on behalf of the government prospecting agreements and petroleum agreements, facilitate the conduct of petroleum activities, develop strategies and policies to minimize and manage the impacts of petroleum activities in the marine environment, advise in the formulation, planning and management of policies in relation to petroleum activities, and do such other things as may be necessary for the proper conduct of petroleum activities. With this bill, Mauritius is preparing to explore its potential and posits itself in an advantageous situation to build petroleum investors' confidence. The Economic Development Board shall have an important role in conducting niche market research and promoting the Mauritius offshore petroleum activities. In this connection, the Department for Continental Shelf shall initiate requests for proposal among potential petroleum companies for the conduct of petroleum activities. The Department for Continental Shelf, Maritime Zones Administration and Exploration would thus be entrusted with appropriate powers so as to enable it to discharge its functions in the most effective and coherent way possible. The powers of the department will be to invite applications for titles, cause any investigation to be carried out in determining an application for the grant of a title, reject an application for the grant of a title, cause any negotiation or consultation to be made before the government enters into a petroleum agreement, vary, renew, suspend or revoke a title, set up such committee as may be necessary, collect fees and levy charges, and exercise such other powers as may be necessary for the purposes of the legislation. The bill, through clause 12, provides for the department to designate, by reference to geographical coordinates, any area in the maritime zones to be released for the purpose of petroleum activities except marine protected areas and reserved areas as provided under Clause 13 of the Offshore Petroleum Bill. The areas designated for petroleum activities shall also be prohibited areas for all unauthorized ships or specified classes of ships except vessels of the National Coast Guard, so as to protect any installation, infrastructure, facilities, or ships being used for petroleum activities. Any area released for the purpose of petroleum activities shall be referred to as a sub-block. Sub-blocks are the graticular sections obtained following the division of the surface of the seabed. A system of titles has been devised for the conduct of petroleum activities. This is also undertaken in other jurisdictions, such as Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados, and closer to us in the Seychelles. A title under the Offshore Petroleum Bill is a prospecting permit, an exploration license, a retention license, or a production license. Every title should obtain the approval of the Prime Minister prior to their issuance by the Department for Continental Shelf Maritime Zones Administration and Exploration and the settlement of the prescribed fee. The Offshore Petroleum Bill lays out 4 types of titles which shall be granted as follows. First, a prospecting permit that confers non-exclusive rights to the permit holder to undertake low-impact exploration activities such as seismic surveying and other non-surface disturbing activities to search for petroleum. The permit is valid for a maximum of 2 years and may be renewed for an additional period of 2 years by mutual agreement and subject to the following conditions. The permit shall not entail any right to drill into the seabed and subsoil, shall not entail the use of explosives or harmful substances in the marine environment, and shall not give ownership or property rights to the prospector over any petroleum acquired in the course of prospecting, such petroleum remaining the property of the state. Second, an exploration license, which allows the licensee to search for petroleum and carry out sampling and analysis of deposits to explore whether petroleum is commercially viable, as well as to test systems, equipment, and processing facilities. It also allows the conduct of studies before production of petroleum and carrying out in-depth risk assessment related to petroleum activities. The exploration license confers exclusive rights to recover petroleum for a period not exceeding 6 years and can be further extended. Any sample of petroleum recovered remains the property of the state. Samples recovered for the purpose of testing and evaluation shall be made accessible to the department, and records of their origin shall be kept. Where a petroleum field that is commercially viable is identified, the department shall declare it as a location. Third, a retention license that allows a licensee to recover petroleum in a licensed area for the purpose of an appraisal, other than for commercial purposes. An exploration licensee may apply for a retention license not later than 2 years, or no later than 4 years, subject to conditions, after the date of declaration of location. The recovery of petroleum from that area must be commercially viable not later than 10 years after the date of submission of the application. A retention license is valid for 5 years and may be extended subject to specific conditions. And fourth, a production license that allows a licensee to recover petroleum in a licensed area for commercial purposes. When petroleum is recovered, the licensee shall acquire the rights to market, process, sell, and export the petroleum at the point of extraction. The license is valid for a maximum of 30 years, during which time periodic reports shall be submitted to the department. Details in an annual report shall include comprehensive information on the results of petroleum activities, health and safety records, a statement of expenditure and costs, as well as a statement showing the amount of royalty and taxes determined to be payable for each reporting period, together with all related information and calculations. The application for a title shall contain, inter alia, the following information: the proposed petroleum activities to be conducted, a general description of the nature and objective of the proposed petroleum activities, including the proposed date of commencement and approximate duration, and the proposed use of the data collected thereof, the methods, equipment, technology, and installations to be used for the conduct of the proposed petroleum activities, any feasibility study or similar study previously carried out by the applicant in relation to the commercial potential of the area within which the proposed petroleum activities are to be conducted, a preliminary assessment of the likely impact on the marine environment of the proposed petroleum activities, and a detailed contingency plan for responding to any incident that may occur during the conduct of the proposed petroleum activities, including the provision for regular simulation exercises. Mr. Speaker, sir, you will note that this long list of requirements will ensure that a proper diligence is carried out and exercised when titles will be granted. Furthermore, a committee comprising of all relevant institutions and experts will be set up with a mandate to examine all title applications. Clause 23 of the bill provides for the duties to be fulfilled by a title holder. These include the following: the title holder shall employ the best environment practice in accordance with international standards and endeavor to take all necessary measures to prevent, reduce, and control pollution to the marine environment. The title holder shall cooperate in capacity building and exercise due diligence for safeguarding the health, safety, and welfare of persons employed in the petroleum activities and ancillary activities. And the title holder shall work collaboratively with the department to ensure the smooth running of the petroleum activities and ancillary activities with a view to mitigating chances of any incidents. To ensure that the title holder is complying with its obligations and to cater for any non-fulfillment from the part of the title holder, Clause 21 of the bill provides for an applicant for a title other than for a prospecting permit to deposit a security bank guarantee before the grant of the title. Clause 27 of the bill makes provisions to attract potential operators by exempting title holders from duty and tax as follows: a title holder and any of his contractors, as certified by the department, shall, in accordance with the Customs Tariff Act, the Excise Act, and the Value Added Tax Act, be exempt from any duty and any other tax for the import of machinery, equipment, vehicle, materials and supplies where such import has been certified by the department to be used solely for the conduct of petroleum activities. Where any of the item imported into Mauritius is no longer required for petroleum activities, it may, in accordance with the Customs Tariff Act, the Excise Act, and the Value Added Tax Act, be exported without payment of any export duty and any other tax. And on the sale or transfer by the importer of any imported item to any person in Mauritius, import duty shall be payable by the importer on the value thereof at the date of such sale or transfer. The Offshore Petroleum Bill provides for the Department for Continental Shelf, Maritime Zones Administration and Exploration, in collaboration with relevant stakeholders, to negotiate on behalf of government petroleum agreement with a potential exploration licensee, retention licensee, or production licensee, so as to further substantiate the terms and conditions linked to the petroleum activities. Thereafter, it shall submit to the government any proposed petroleum agreement for its recommendations and approval. If approval is granted, the department shall, on behalf of government, enter into a petroleum agreement with a potential exploration licensee, retention licensee, or production licensee. A petroleum agreement shall include the following provisions: payment of royalties and taxes calculated in accordance with the Income Tax Act and any other relevant enactment, the payment of charges and such other fees as the department may determine, insurance covering any damage to the environment in the maritime zones of Mauritius, including oil pollution damage and liabilities, the circumstances or the manner in which a discretion conferred under the agreement is to be exercised, the requirements relating to project financing, auditing, and reporting, requirements concerning exploration and production work plans, operations and relinquishment, requirements concerning decommissioning obligations and the financing of decommissioning, abandonment operations so as to remove all installations, equipment and infrastructure in the title area to ensure that the area does not constitute a danger to persons, shipping or other marine environment. Requirements concerning compliance with environmental impact assessment and any obligations. Procedures concerning the settlement of disputes, necessary measures to be taken by the potential exploration licensee, retention licensee, or production licensee in case damage is caused to the marine environment. Standards and guidelines for petroleum activities, including an environmental code of practice and a safety code of practice, and any document that the department may determine for the conduct of petroleum activities. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are also mindful of the environmental and ecological risks associated with petroleum activities, and therefore the Offshore Petroleum Bill provides for the implementation of environmental best practices and safeguards so as to mitigate the impacts of such incidents. These are, inter alia, the development and adherence to standards and guidelines for petroleum activities, including an environment code of practice and a safety code of practice, the inclusion in petroleum agreements of insurance covering any damage to the environment in the maritime zones of Mauritius, including oil pollution damage and liabilities, ensuring that marine protected areas and declared reserve areas shall not be released for the purpose of petroleum activities, the imposition of a security bank guarantee shall be used in the event of failure to fulfill obligations by title holders to rectify any damage of loss caused as a result of such failure, including for cleanup or compensation costs in respect of any damage caused by pollution or other incident occurring as a result of petroleum activities, and the adherence by the title holders to conditions specified in the respective EIA licenses, including all mitigation strategies for the protection of the environment and prevention of pollution based on oceanographic and environmental baseline studies and other relevant studies. In addition, the Environment Code of Practice will provide further assurance for the sustainable management of the petroleum resources and marine environment of the maritime zones, and the code will include protecting the marine environment and associated ecosystems, taking all appropriate measures to protect and preserve biological diversity and rare or fragile ecosystems, as well as species of wild fauna and flora and their habitats, sustaining the potential of petroleum resources to meet the needs of future generations, safeguarding the life-supporting capacity of the environment, and avoiding, remedying, or mitigating any adverse effects of activities on the environment. The Safety Code of Practice will ensure the safe, secure, and sustainable conduct of petroleum activities while reducing all risk factors, including the maintenance of the integrity of the offshore installation, securing the safety of operational personnel, and protecting the marine environment. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is an unequivocal fact that Mauritius relies heavily on petroleum imports. For the year 2020, Mauritius imported around 1 metric ton of petroleum, and in financial terms, this represents a cost of around 38 billion rupees. For a transparent fund management, and more importantly, in order for each Mauritian to benefit directly from revenue that are generated from petroleum activities, provision is therefore made for the raising of funds as follows: the setting up of a petroleum fund under clause 74, into which all monies shall be paid and which shall be administered and managed by the ministry responsible for the subject of finance. The payment of royalties and taxes in accordance with the amended Income Tax Act and as specified in the Petroleum Agreement for the extraction of petroleum. The bill sets forth a three-tiered tax regime comprising the following: petroleum royalties, income tax at the rate specified in Part 4 of the first schedule on its chargeable income, and petroleum additional profits tax, and the payment of charges and such other fees to government as may be prescribed. Mr. Speaker, sir, again, in our effort to make the process transparent, and so that all our fellow citizens are apprised of these undertakings, the Department for Continental Shelf shall maintain a register to be known as the Register of Titles that will contain up-to-date and accurate records of applications received for titles and other relevant information on the status of those titles. This register shall be available and open for public consultation during business hours of the department. We are also aware that offshore petroleum activities would need to be properly monitored so as to ensure that these are carried out according to the set protocols and standards. Therefore, the Offshore Petroleum Bill caters for an enforcement mechanism as follows. Under Clause 66, the Department for Continental Shelf may designate or appoint officers to act as inspectors. The inspectors shall, inter alia, board or obtain access to any licensed area and all parts of any premises, ships, machinery or equipment used for or in connection with petroleum activities, inspect or test any machinery or equipment which is being or is intended to be used for or in connection with petroleum activities, and may dismantle, test or take possession of any such machinery or equipment. Remove any sample or assay of such samples from any ship, machinery or equipment used for or in connection with petroleum activities. Examine and take copies of books, accounts, documents, records of any kind required to be kept. Require a title holder to carry out such procedures in respect of any machinery or equipment used for or in connection with petroleum activities as the department may determine. Document any site, visit or inspection activity using any reasonable means, including video, audio, photograph, or other form of recording. Under Clause 67, a police officer, where an offence is committed or about to be committed, may stop, board, search, detain, or seize a ship, arrest any person suspected of having committed an offence, seize any property on board which is suspected to have been used in connection with the commission of an offence, and use such force as may be necessary. Clause 81 describes the offences under the bill and also the criminal liability of the offenders. For instance, a person who conducts petroleum activities without a title shall be liable to a fine not exceeding 30 million rupees or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years, while a body corporate which contravenes in the same way shall be liable to a fine not exceeding 150 million rupees. The minister to whom responsibility for the subject of non-living marine resources is assigned may make such regulations as he thinks fit for the purposes of this legislation, as per Clause 83. The regulations made may provide for the graticulation, mapping of blocks and sub-blocks, for the payment of fees, royalties and taxes, for the administration and management of the Petroleum Fund, for the amendment of the schedules, and that any person who contravenes them shall commit an offence and shall on conviction be liable to a fine not exceeding 100,000 rupees and to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 2 years. Moreover, the implementation of this piece of legislation would also require consequential amendments to the Customs Tariff Act, the Environment Protection Act, the Excise Act, the Income Tax Act, and the Value Added Tax Act. It is believed that the Offshore Petroleum Bill being proposed will not only provide the necessary impetus in accelerating the development of our blue economy and tapping the latent resources in our maritime zones, but will also contribute in our long walk towards economic recovery. The Offshore Petroleum Bill will contribute in consolidating the base for a new pillar of our economy. Looking at the sheer size of our unexploited EEZ, Mauritius has indeed the potential to be a major player in the marine natural resources sector. The time is right enough for Mauritius to have this brand new legislative framework which builds upon the 2020 agreement for the conduct of multi-client seismic surveys in our EEZ. With these words, Mr. Speaker, sir, I commend the bill to the House.
Mr. Speaker, sir, the timing is right according to what the Prime Minister just concluded. We think the contrary. We think that the timing is clearly not right. The timing is odd. This is the Prime Minister himself and his delegation are leaving in a few days for the COP26 conference negotiations. In the COP26 negotiations, Mauritius wishes, I presume, to appear credible. Mauritius wishes to appear sincere in its attempt to prevent the world from going upside down and from disaster hitting all of us. Mauritius, of course, being in the top 10 of countries most at risk from climate-related disasters. So the timing is odd. We are going to COP26, once again asking for funds. We're going to ask the international donors, overseas countries, to give us, Mr. Speaker, 210 billion rupees to finance 65% of our efforts, which our efforts in mitigation at least, which concerns us today, is we want to reduce the production of energy by we want to have 60% of energy produced from green sources in Mauritius, the total phasing out of coal before 2030, etc., etc. This is on page 4 of our initially nationally determined contribution for the Republic of Mauritius. So it is odd that we are going to ask for money, huge sums of money, to help us help the world and help ourselves. At the same time, a week before, we pass a bill that will, as the Prime Minister himself has said, make of Mauritius a major player. That's the word he used, a major player in the extraction of fossil fuels in the world. That is, I think, Mr. Speaker, incongruous. It is even a little bit sort of schizophrenic. We're going to ask to join the conference to reduce the use of fossil fuels, and at the same time, we want to be a major player in the production of the same fossil fuel for the future. And so, Mr. Speaker, I clearly think that the timing is not right, that this bill, if it were to come, would best come after the Prime Minister and the delegation has had a chance to meet other world leaders, has had a chance to listen to the conference, and maybe even be convinced at the conference as to what the way ahead is. And certainly, it would be a little odd if people were to give us 210 billion rupees on the one hand and expect to be walloped with far greater numbers of fossil fuel from the actions of the same country which they have helped to the tune of 210 billion rupees. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, it could be said that the bill presented today is not serious, it's not right, timing is wrong, and this bill, Mr. Speaker, sir, in my opinion, we have presented it today, so it's too late. It should be anyway, I think, fully debated after COP26 for the reasons that I am saying now. I mean, the Prime Minister should not insist on a vote today for this bill. Let's have it after COP26 when your delegation returns, and we'll see whether you still hold the same view or whether changes need to be made to our policy. Anyway, also, Mr. Speaker, what are we talking about when we talk about petroleum deposits, oil deposits? We're talking about a national resource. Not only a national resource, but a national resource that will be depleted over time. So, what is the position of Mauritians? Has anyone consulted Mauritians? This is the Assembly, yes. But all Mauritians are concerned. The youth are concerned. Should we? Some countries, people talk of Guyana, some countries, the population has been against the production of oil. I said, no, we value our future more than the revenues that will accrue, supposedly accrue, from oil. So I think, Mr. Speaker, sir, this bill should not be voted before there is a national debate on the future actions that this country should take with regard to fossil fuels. Now, Mr. Speaker, also I think I'm a bit surprised when the Prime Minister mentioned that related this bill to the COVID-19 pandemic, as if now we are expecting our huge levels of debt, the record level of debt that we have never before have we had so much. In absolute terms, level of debt in Mauritius never had this level before in absolute terms, even after raiding the Bank of Mauritius. So it's highly optimistic of the Prime Minister to link the offshore petroleum industry to repayment of the debt, which he seems to have done which he seemed to have done in the opening of the speech, relating the bill to the huge expenses which happened during the COVID-19 pandemic. I think, Mr. Speaker, sir, there is no guarantee that any oil will be found, that any oil in sufficient commercial quantities will be found and extracted. This depends on a lot of things, Mr. Speaker, sir. Firstly, it depends on really the existence of oil in the economic zone of Mauritius. That, to my mind, has not been established. Neither has it really been established in the Seychelles, which obviously our sister nation, which is ahead of us in terms of exploring for oil in their territory. So it hasn't really been established, neither in the Seychelles ahead of us, nor in Mauritius. And then, of course, you have to have it in commercial quantities, so fairly large. And we all know that Mauritian waters are extremely deep. And so, will the price of oil as it is now, $85 to the barrel, let's say, for Brent, will that cover the cost of extraction or not? And what will happen to the price of oil in the future? With COP26 coming along, every country promising to reduce their dependence on fossil fuel. The UK has, as the House will know, recently announced that as from 2020, in a few years' time, no new petrol or diesel car will be sold in the UK, as from 2030, in a few years' time. So what is the real commercial benefit of extracting oil in Mauritius? Deep waters, the quantity, even if it is there, is not really known, and of course, whether the price of oil at any point in time will be sufficient to cover the cost of extraction. It is no secret that this sort of extraction of oil has been on the cards since independence. In the last PMSD Labour government, we dealt with it. We thought about it. You talk about the Commonwealth Secretariat, we had talks with them. The World Bank, we had talks with them. But in the end, the price of oil was not attractive enough for us to carry on. So whether now, when we're coming to the end of oil as the king of energy, now we are going to find that it is commercially viable. Well, Mr. Speaker, I wouldn't bet on it, and I certainly would not bet on it to repay our astronomical national debt. I would advise the government to find another means of repaying our national debt rather than on this questionable finding of oil in commercial quantities in Mauritius. Mr. Speaker, we've been told that since February 2020, I was not aware of this until recently, a large company called CGG, which I understand has also large financial troubles, but that's another issue, has had a contract to survey, seismic survey of some waters of Mauritius. Again, this is what I'm going to talk about in a moment. What transparency? Now the Prime Minister has spoken for about an hour maybe. He hasn't told us what this CGG, who is paying for that? What will it cost? Is the taxpayer paying for that? Are they paying it themselves? Are they finding, as I understand maybe is the case, some financiers to finance the activity? It must be quite expensive to do so. And if they are self-funding this activity, what will be the reward that is provided to CGG? Perhaps the Minister of Environment, who's talking after, can provide us some information on this. Because we need to know. Because one of the points that I'm going to raise, Mr. Speaker, is how open and transparent is the process of granting licenses to our national resource, if it exists. What are the safety safeguards? What are the transparency? And one example at hand is exactly the contract given to CGG, of which I believe the National Assembly knows nothing about. And I would invite the Prime Minister, and perhaps before him, the Minister of Environment, to be completely transparent about this contract, which worries me. How much will it cost? Who is paying for it? If somebody else is paying for it, it may be even worse. What is being promised in return? So, Mr. Speaker, that is an example of exactly what we want to avoid with the allocation of contracts under this forthcoming offshore petroleum bill, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, who has advised government in the production of this bill? We are told that the Commercial Secretariat has initially advised government. What does that mean? Does it mean that this bill, being best practice, has been vetted and approved by the Commercial Secretariat, as it was our aim in the past? Or has it been that they've initially, maybe last year, 2 years ago, I don't know when, given some input, and then said the rest has been done by this famous department at the Prime Minister's office? This, can we have additional comfort from the Prime Minister and his ministers as to what was the involvement of Commercial Secretariat and whether this bill has indeed been vetted and approved by them, which would surprise me, I must say, which would surprise me tremendously if that was the case. Now, Mr. Speaker, in this world, as the Prime Minister has said, there are many examples to follow and not to follow. And really the decision here is, which example do we follow? Do we follow Norway? Everybody applauds the way Norway has proceeded. Do we follow Alaska? Again, one of the leaders in good governance? Or do we follow Nigeria? That's also a possibility in Mauritius. We can follow Nigeria and some of the other countries where, in fact, oil probably has contributed making the country poorer because of the pollution and because of the corruption. So, Mr. Speaker, which are we going to follow? It is not clear in my mind. Now, why it's not clear? Because, Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned earlier, there is absolutely no transparency in this act. It seems to be that we're going to have a department staffed by someone, and we don't know who it is, etc. Okay, that doesn't matter. A department in the Prime Minister's office, and that department will do everything. It will negotiate, it will find people, it will allocate contracts, it will decide everything. It will sign, even with the Prime Minister's approval, I see, it will sign the model petroleum agreement. This will all be done, and there seems to me to be no mention at all of any auction or open tender in the whole process. And we are potentially talking about billions, upon billions, and not rupees, of dollars, Mr. Speaker. In my mind, Mr. Speaker, the minimum is that the bids must be open. The bids must be competitive. The bids must be transparent. That is the minimum that we can expect of Mauritius in 2021 that has just left, thank God, the grey list of the Financial Action Task Force. That is the minimum, but it is not here. It is not provided here. And this is a highly, of course, technical decision as to what are the environmental norms that will be applied to anyone seeking to operate in the offshore petroleum sector in Mauritius. Highly technical, Mr. Speaker, as far as the environment is concerned, and as far as the threats to pollution is concerned. Even Florida, Mr. Speaker, of the USA has not been spared. So that is the wrong partner, Mr. Speaker. Getting the wrong partner, getting the wrong technology would be a disaster for Mauritius. So I can see here no transparency. There is titles register, which the Prime Minister has mentioned, when the people has a title, etc. But even there, it says that commercially sensitive information will not be given to anyone, I presume even to the House, and now even not even to the Director of Audit from what the Commissioner of Police has done. And of course, Section 79 of the bill does impose a duty of confidentiality on everyone involved in this sector concerned by this bill. So, Mr. Speaker, no transparency at all. And obviously there, the temptation for any government would be tremendous. And let's look now at the example of Exxon, big company, Exxon in Guyana, where there was one recent article which claimed that the government there had wittingly, unwittingly, up to us to decide, we don't know, signed a deal with Exxon that had lost tens of billions of dollars potentially to the Guyana Republic. That is also a possibility. Wittingly or unwittingly, lack of knowledge, lack of experience, obviously these guys, let's take Exxon, they will be experts in negotiations, Mr. Speaker. Who in Mauritius is an expert in negotiating oil deals? The Prime Minister has not talked to us about who is going to assist in even examining the bids, deciding whether the bid is good or not good. Let's imagine, Mr. Speaker, that we talk about the various taxes. The levels are not provided for in the bill. We don't know how much is going to be the additional taxes and royalties, etc. That is going to be by negotiation. That is what we understand. Now, these These are too high, Mr. Speaker. No one will come. These are too low. The government and the people of Mauritius will use billions upon billions of dollars. So, will the Prime Minister tell us now that he wants to have this bill passed with a certificate of urgency today? What provision has he made to obtain appropriate technical advice on the environment and also, as importantly, appropriate advice on negotiations, assistance on negotiations, and advice on what level to set our taxes so that nobody loses out in this deal, Mr. Speaker. And I note that again, Seychelles is better than us. Their law, there's published in the law a model petroleum agreement. Where can you see this in this bill? It's a secret. Nobody will bother to give this Parliament the model petroleum agreement. So again, we are completely in the dark, Mr. Speaker, sir. Let me come now, not going to be that long, on the famous Petroleum Fund, Section 74. Now, I mentioned before that the resource, the petrol, is limited in time, the oil, limited in time, won't be there forever. We use it, we get revenue for it for some time, and then we see what is to be done with the money. Now, the quality of the institutions, which is going to manage potentially billions of rupees of taxpayers' money. Nothing is said in this bill about the quality of that institution. All we know is going to be managed like MOFED, by MOFED, Ministry of Finance. Are we going to see another MIC, Mauritius Investment Corporation, with friends and friends of friends queuing up? And we have more information coming on AIC soon. You will see. Friends of friends coming up to borrow hundreds of millions of rupees, if not billions of rupees. Is the Petroleum Fund going to be another MIC? Because I can see no provision in the law either for transparency, for review, for accountability. None whatsoever, Mr. Speaker. So, the Petroleum Fund, is it going to be like Norway, Alaska? Or are we going to be like Nigeria, Chad, and all these countries, Mr. Speaker, that have seen the national wealth depleted, wasted, corrupted over time? Mr. Speaker, we need transparency badly. We need quality institutions. And this bill, if it were a serious bill, would provide Mauritians with the guarantee that the Petroleum Fund, with a scheme, a schema, for how the Petroleum Fund would be run, how it would be managed, what would be its priorities, and what would be the transparency and involvement of the National Assembly in the use of the Petroleum Fund in national resource. And I would suggest, Mr. Speaker, sir, that if ever we find petrol, and that is a big if, then the Petroleum Fund should be accountable to a committee of this House, because this money belongs to the nation and to future generations, and we cannot just leave it, like MIC, like so many of these special funds, in the hands only, in the secret hands of government. As we know, Mr. Speaker, even simple questions on the Mauritius Investment Corporation, which has 80 billion rupees of Mauritian, of taxpayers' money, were virtually refused in this House, which is in itself a scandal, Mr. Speaker. So here we are. We have this fund. We don't know how it's going to be managed. We don't know what the objectives are. All we know is that if ever we find oil, if ever, then billions will be coming to that fund. Mr. Speaker, I will end here to say that I really think that this bill is not ready to be passed in Parliament. It has substantial lacuna as far as accountability is concerned, and I will certainly, Mr. Speaker, be voting against this bill. To say whether Mauritius should go or should not go into oil exploration is a subject for national debate. Of course, we are entitled to obtain money to help the poor, the people who most need it. Of course we are. But we have also responsibility towards future generations. And this must be fully debated before we proceed, Mr. Speaker. And I will reserve my judgment in time, but that must be fully debated. At the moment, Mr. Speaker, and to finish, I'll say to me, this bill looks like a shot in the dark, or maybe not. Or maybe, in fact, there are punters and promoters which are waiting discreetly in the corridors of power. Time will tell, Mr. Speaker, sir. Time will tell. Hopefully we will find out what really happens despite all the confidentiality clauses that are included in this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We suspend the sitting for 30 minutes for refueling.